What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Everything College Basketball Podcast. It is finally here. It is NCAA Tournament time. Brackets were revealed last night on CBS. We have our full field of 68 teams that'll make up this year's NCAA Tournament. It's our biggest show of the year, and I cannot be more excited to be joined with the full panel and the full team today. We'll start with my teammate, Mr. Peyton Burton. Peyton, it's March, buddy.
Oh, yeah. It's net cutting season time, baby. Best time of the year. I love every moment about this, and I'm very excited to get into this preview show, and I hope everybody's excited to watch or listen.
Right next to him is another one of my teammates, Mr. Trevor Everett. We also have Mr. Phil Dexter, Michael DeRosa joining the squad again. Fellas, the ones not named Peyton that didn't get a chance to talk. It is March. We have a full field of 68. We're going to talk about each and every bracket, breaking it down live for you here on the YouTube, Twitter, House of College Hoops, ECB, Twitter, YouTube, all that fun stuff. Fellas, Trevor, I'll let you start first. We have an NCAA tournament to discuss.
I'm elated. Look, last night we had a great time at House of College Hoops. That was definitely more reactionary based, had almost 1,000 people concurrently throughout the night. So huge shout out to everybody for putting that together. But we're actually going to talk about picks, things that people care about. We had guys in the comments last night chirping at us like, why aren't you guys making predictions? Hey, buddy, live, 5 o'clock right now. We're doing it. I'm so excited. And look, there's just so much to unpack. I can't wait to get into it.
Phil, it's the first time you've been on the show and I think all year, right? Outside of our YouTube video we did last week with DA Houston, which we're going to talk about Longwood here in a little bit, but it's nice to see your beautiful face again back for tournament time.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I'm like a star player. I don't need to warm up, so I just show up when it's clutch time. So, ready to make some clutch baskets for you guys here. And, I've only been on a couple times. I was on for the DA Houston interview, was on for the interview with Rich McKay earlier in the year, so happy to be back.
People need to understand, though, how much work Phil's been doing behind the scenes. The top 25 would not be possible without Phil. And then, obviously, some of those interviews, like, we wouldn't be able to get those set up without you. So, glad to have you back, Big Sexy. Good to see you.
Welcome back, baby. My favorite ginger.
And then we have Michael DeRosa. You guys know the face, know the name, and he is the resident Big East homer, and he will try to convince you that Seton Hall, Providence, St. John's should have been in the tournament. We're going to shut him down, but DeRosa, it's good to have you on our special tournament show.
I will not attempt to convince you that Providence deserved to be in the tournament. The other two I will. Good to be here, and fuck you, Peyton.
Whoa.
We're coming out of the gates hot for the tournament special. Again, we are on the YouTube, the Twitter, the Facebook group. We're on the House of College Hoops, Twitter as well. So make sure that you're following. If you're following along with us, leave the comments, follow along, leave your predictions, questions, comments. We will get to them. Hopefully, without spoiling it, later in the show, we will have a big surprise or two guests joining us, but we will cross that bridge when we get there. Let's jump right into it, fellas. The field of 68 on CBS last night was revealed. The top 16 seeds, you have UConn, the number 1 overall seed in this NCAA tournament. No surprise to really anybody that's been paying attention. The other 1 seeds, Houston is a 1 in the South. You have Purdue, a 1 in the Midwest, and North Carolina, a 1 in the West. Really any surprise with those top number 1 seeds there?
I'll just be short and sweet on this because I'm not super surprised, but I'm a little surprised the Iowa State thing. Like I had time to kind of reflect last night. I wasn't necessarily as in on it, but then I think Matt Norlander and Gary Parrish made a really great convincing case about some of the stuff with Iowa State, and I could see not less about them being a 1, but more of that about them being the last 2. I thought that was kind of crazy, and obviously that set us up for they made a really good case to set us up for UConn, even though I do think there is a region that, let's be clear, UConn's bracket is the bracket of death. I think we all agree on that just because of how top-heavy it is. I would argue that the West is just the most unpredictable, and I think that gives it kind of its own bracket of death. But for Iowa State to be the worst 2 seed, I don't agree with, and then for it to mean that they're going to have to potentially play UConn to make it to the Final Four, I think that's unfair to both parties a little bit there, which I think just speaks to one of the thousands of seeding things that I'm sure we'll spend way too long on today.
You guys
Yeah,
go ahead, Peyton.
I got quick thoughts on that. I agree with Trevor. It was a little surprising to see Iowa State as a final 2 seed in this region, especially after they just won the Big 12 championship by destroying a really good freaking Houston squad in convincing fashion from start to go. They whooped Houston's ass, and for them to get the final 2 seed, they definitely got screwed. But also, he already kind of mentioned it. UConn kind of got screwed as well because they're the 1 seed in this bracket, the overall 1 seed. They've got the Big 12 champ. They've got the Big 10 champ. They've got the SEC champ, and they got the last 2 Final Four squads from last year and San Diego State and Florida Atlantic. This is definitely the region of death, in my opinion, and it's not an easy route for UConn as a lot of people think it is.
Phil, we have some guys. I know who it is. It's our good friend Johnny Stroud said, "Who's this new guy? That Dexter fella? It's been a long time no see, my friend." Your thoughts on the number 1 seeds? Do you think Iowa State had a case to be made for the number 1 seed?
I think they had a case to be made, but I don't necessarily have a problem with UNC getting the final 1. I'm sort of with Peyton, though. Them coming out and being the last 2 seed is the part that doesn't make sense to me. That East bracket is pretty brutal. I mean, also getting Illinois in there. I don't think they did UNC any favor, or UConn any favors.
DeRosa, your thoughts on it?
I think to me, it kind of shows that the committee doesn't really watch the games past like Friday or whatever. Because, I mean, as much as we love NC State on this show because of our friend Trevor, that's still a Q2 loss for UNC. And Q2, Q3, one of the two. And then we look at Iowa State and they beat the piss out of a Houston team that got a 1 seed. So I just think they don't really consider games past the Friday, which is why, in my humble opinion, every single championship game should be on the Saturday, and then we can just bracket Sunday.
I agree.
And then include everything.
I agree. They've shown time and time again, Sunday does not matter. Really, conference tournaments, there can be a longer discussion how much conference tournaments actually matter unless you are a bid stealer or somebody on the bubble. Case in point, we will get to them when we get over there to the South region, but Kentucky got beat in the first round and then the conference tournament. They still ended up a 3 seed. I will make this point, and it was a point of contention that Phil brought up to us in our group thread there, in our text thread between Clark Kellogg and Jay Wright. They were arguing back and forth between Iowa State. Jay Wright tried to make the voucher that Iowa State should be a 1 seed. And basically the committee of the chair of the selection committee confirmed that they were a 2 because of their non-conference strength of schedule. They played nobody in the non-con, and it come back to haunt them, which I like.
Yeah. Go
out and play people. You can't play Jacksonville State of the blind and deaf 15 times for conference play. Go out and play people, test yourself. We have a couple teams that are in solely because of their strength of schedule. We will get to those, I promise you. Rounding out some of the other higher seeds, back in the East, we mentioned UConn's the 1. The other top seeds in that, we have the 2 seed Iowa State that we've just talked about. Illinois is the 3 in that region, and Auburn is the 4. Over in the South, Houston's the 1, Marquette the 2, Kentucky the 3, Duke the 4. Very interesting region. Down in the Midwest, Purdue fell all the way to the number 3 overall 1 seed. Interesting discussions around that potentially, but they're the 1 out in the Midwest. Tennessee's the 2, Creighton's the 3, Kansas is the 4, and then out west, North Carolina got the final number 1. 2 seed Arizona. A lot of storylines I'm sure we're going to talk about, potential matchup there. Baylor's the 3, and Alabama's the 4. Anybody, besides taking out the 1s, anybody else inside those top 16 seeds that maybe caught you guys off guard, misplaced, or anything of note that you want to discuss real quick?
I don't know. The more I'm sitting here thinking about it, I don't think so. I think the few seeding things they got correct, I think it was minus a few of the tit-tat things we had already talked about. I think they got it right.
Yeah, I agree. I ain't got any thoughts on the top 4 seeds.
Yeah, I think
whoever posted this says, "Damn, all you fellas have faces for radio." Sheesh.
He can't
Look
even.
Look at me and tell me you believe that. Come on now.
Hey, I was on radio last Friday. So I agree.
Hide behind the Facebook user thing there. That's fun.
Hey man, we're like MTV in 1980, boy. we're video for the radio star there, or whatever that was. Let's talk about a lot of people want to talk about, right? Before we get breaking down and really dive into these brackets, let's talk about some bubble talk, who got in, who was left out, and the snubs. Obviously, being a big contingent of the ECB fan base is obviously located in the state of Indiana. Let's go right into Indiana State. Now, they had a great case to get in. I know the reason why we discussed this last night. It was made obvious to us why they did not get in, and maybe in most years they would get in. But let's go around the horn real quick. We'll start with, we'll actually go reverse order. DeRosa, if you were in charge of the committee, would Indiana State be in this NCAA tournament, yes or no?
If I was in charge of the committee, Virginia would not be in this tournament. So we can just decide who we'd put in for Virginia from there. Would it be Seton Hall? Would it be St. John's? Indiana State would be up there. I think the fact that we had so many bid steals makes it really difficult to put in some of these mid-majors. But yeah, I'd try to find a way to get Indiana State in there. They're one of the best 38 teams in the country. Sure, I'd try to find a way.
Phil, Indiana State would have been in, yes or no, if you had the pin?
Yeah, I would personally have preferred to see them in over a team like Colorado. So yes, they would have been in for me.
Trevor?
I can't. We'll get to Colorado later. I can't defend the Colorado part of that, but they definitely deserve to get in over like a Virginia or others. Like, I'm not nitpicking Colorado there. Yeah, I would have Indiana State in. I mean, if the net is this sorting tool that we all believe is the Bible to what the committee thinks it is, maybe. Then why are they the 29th team in there, and why did they not, get a stronger consideration? I really think even third was probably a little bit disrespectful. I think they were honestly potentially a better case than even Oklahoma, but some of Oklahoma's obviously playing Big 12 play really helped them.
Peyton?
The net rankings are a joke. Said it last year. I'm going to continue to say it. That is the most flawed system in sports, period. It's ridiculous. How in the world can you be top 30 in the net and not make the NCAA tournament when you have a quad one win as a mid-major? You should instantly get in over Virginia. They're the highest ranked net team to not make the NCAA tournament ever. It's ridiculous. If there wasn't 5 bid stealers, then 100% Indiana State would have comfortably probably made it, maybe not even made it the first 4 game. But man, Virginia does not deserve to be in this NCAA tournament. I don't care how many games they won. I don't care who's coaching their program. They did not deserve it. Therefore, I think Indiana State should have made it over Virginia.
Even more so, think about the fact that, like, and I'm sure this may have come up at some point, and even I may have brought it up when we got to this team later, but since we're not picking per se, like matchups specifically, think about the fact that, like, even New Mexico, right, who's also very high in the net, they're 22nd. Again, remember, it's a sorting tool. I think we all need to realize that again.
Yeah.
But the problem is, even a team like, for crying out loud, New Mexico would have absolutely been in if it were not for winning the Mountain West. They should have been. And the committee openly admitting that within less than an hour after that happening is the most dumb, ridiculous thing they've ever said on national television. And then not to mention all the other Mountain West seating problems that we obviously saw occur, I'm sure we'll get into later. My point is though, if we're not picking out Indiana State as the specific example, right, I'm sure DeRosa has these points about the Big East. There's plenty of teams that deserve to be in over Virginia. And Virginia's getting picked on. Let's be real, right? They are. But there are other teams even
reason,
but like Michigan State, there's no way they should have been a freaking 8, 9, whatever they were. 9, I think is what it was, right?
Being that high,
I don't care about the no quad 3, quad 4 losses, right? There's enough teams in that same area. Like even FAU, that's the one that is kind of putting people at a rise right now. Is that there's no way they were that comfortably in. They get an 8 with Q4 losses against Bryant and I believe Temple as well. My point being is, even like a team like New Mexico, there was multiple things that they got wrong that ultimately end up saving their tail because teams were bid stealers or automatic qualifiers. So it's just ridiculous, and I use the New Mexico point to hammer the point about Indiana State more than anything.
Well, we got comments.
All too. No, I need to get this out because this bothered me earlier. Their explanation for not putting Seton Hall in was because Donovan Clingan got injured in the game.
I seen that. That's ridiculous.
That ain't Seton Hall's fault. What did Shaheen Holloway? Do you think Shaheen Holloway rolled a ball out there and made a restrict on it? What the fuck? What are we doing here? Well, I mean, that was bullshit. What the fuck?
We've got more hate for Virginia making the tournament from our good friend over here at Michael Davis. Shout out Tobacco Sports Road Radio. Michael does a great job over there. He's hammering the home of the point too. Virginia getting in over even a team like App State's kind of ridiculous. Shout out to our good friend Connor McCabe, always following along on the live YouTube chat. He said, who loses out when they win? That's what it's supposed to mean. Win their conference with a guaranteed auto bid. That shit's rigged. Listen, man, the reason why Indiana State, Peyton talked about it. We discussed this a little bit last night on the House College Hoops bracket show. But the reason why Indiana State or an App State or some of these other teams that historically would have gotten in did not get in as an at-large is because we had 5 bid stealers. To put that in perspective, the last 3 or 4 years alone combined before this year, we had a total of 3 outright bid stealers. We had 5 in this year's conference tournament. So unfortunately, Trevor, when North Carolina State wins the ACC unexpectedly, it knocks a team like Indiana State out. And I know you're not going to apologize for that.
Boo! Indiana State! Your coach is leaving for St. Louis! Oh my God! Your coach is a Billiken! Oh my God! God, give me a break. Cry me a freaking river. 5 games in 5 nights. The last team that did that was a national champion in 2011. Give me a freaking break.
But that's the reality, though. I mean, bid stealers kind of kept Indiana State out, fair or not. But that's kind of the bubble deal. We mentioned Virginia. Obviously, all of us think that they shouldn't be anywhere near this NCAA tournament, not only because of record and net and all the fun stuff, but their style of play is so hard to digest. It's so hard and unappeasing and unappealing to watch, but we will get into all that and more. I want to ask you guys, when we look at this bracket, or all 4 of the regions here, if you had to put a label on, if we think in soccer terms, think of the World Cup, think of the Champions League, there's always that bracket of death or group of death in soccer. We've had 24 hours almost to completely digest these brackets. We'll start with Phil since he hasn't been on in a while. Phil, if you had to label one of these regions as the region of death, which one are you going to?
I mean, I sort of mentioned it at the top. I would say I would go with Peyton, probably the East. It is kind of top heavy, but I mean, you have the Big East champion, the Big 12 champion, the SEC champion, and the Big 10 champion all in the same region. Illinois is really hot right now. Auburn's been playing some great basketball right now. I would have to stick with the East.
Trevor?
I'll give Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander, I said it earlier, I'll give them a lot of credit. When you do the KenPom rankings, I know it's not the Bible, and even Ken will tell you that, but when you do the total combined value rankings of the 4 highest seeds of each of those regions, the East combines for 13 total points. So the lower, the better, right? Auburn being like top 5, I believe. UConn, Illinois, all of these teams in the top 4, Iowa State, right? And then like the next closest is in the 30s. And by the way, it's the West, which is my point for the West. I think the West just has so much unpredictability. We'll get into it when we go to talk about the West, obviously. But I think the West is a region of death only because I know the top heaviness of the East is so strong, but the consistency of there's so many teams. I said it last night on the House College Hoop Show. I think the West is the only bracket that a double-digit seed can make the Final Four, realistically, right? And then one last thing for B. Michael Davis here. We're never going to get to this today, and I hope we talk about it at some point when the NIT kicks off in a few weeks. But when people, specifically Michael, he's not the only person that said this to me, tell me that the doing 27-6 or 28-6, whatever App State was, and not making the tournament is meaningless. I gave him this whole ordeal about the NIT meaning something to those teams more, and I laid the case out. I think I told Peyton and Josh this before. But begins tomorrow. Thank you for the clarity, Michael. I saw the dates and I couldn't remember when it started. But long story short, the NIT means something to small schools and they need to go out and prove themselves. They play Wake Forest in the first round. And I just don't want to hear from people that having a great season and not making the tournament as a mid-major means nothing. I think it's ridiculous to say that kind of thing.
DeRosa, Peyton, region of death for both of you. Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I kind of said mine, me and Phil on the same page in this one. It's the East. You got the Big 10 champ, you got the SEC champ, and you got the Big 12 champ in there, and then 2 Final Four teams from last year. Very top heavy. I do agree with Trevor, though. We'll get into it later on when we do like our preview. I think the most chaos is going to be in the West for sure. East might hold all chalk. We'll see. But I definitely think the East is the region of death.
Well, and real quick, though, the East does have some potential for some upsets as well. I mean, UAB is a really good mid-major school. Drake is solid. I mean, Tucker DeVries might be the best player on the floor in some of the games they play. So there's some potential for some upsets in that region as well.
DeRosa, region of death.
Yeah, I think the East is the easy answer, but I also could see like just the way Iowa State plays. I feel like they're due. Like someone could just beat Iowa State. It wouldn't stun me that much. Hi, Tommy. How you doing? I love the Mormons too. Shut up BYU, my King Ali Khalifa. I think Auburn can make a deep run, but I'm not going to pick the East just because everybody did, and that would be boring. Like agreeing with these dum-dums, please. Give me a region no one talked about. Give me the South. This is a Duke
one,
team.
baby.
Yeah, this is a Duke team I had #1 preseason. James Madison lost 3 games this year. I think they won round 1. Your 9 seeds, you have guards that can just go ballistic, and Tominaga or Wade Taylor, 8-9 game. Kentucky. I mean, when Kentucky gets it going, they get it going. And Texas Tech could also just beat Kentucky. Like that is something that could happen. That is another team.
Talk about
dynamic offenses, just excellent offenses. Florida, Marquette when they get it going. And when some of those teams have their best day, they can beat anybody. Anybody.
So you took the words out of my mouth. The South was going to be my region as well. When everybody's firing, and when we get to that, it may be described as maybe the most offensive-minded region. Even a team like Oakland shoots a hell of a lot of threes. We had that comment over here real quick I want to get to before we really dive in. From who'd you say this was? Was this Tommy?
This is Tommy.
Love Tommy. Okay. Question for the panel. 1, why does the Big East keep getting disrespected? No surprise, he's a Big East guy. And when does the NIT show start? Hi, Mike. The NIT show starts with Tony Patelis and Phil Dexter right after this. So we'll be discussing that. And no, seriously, the Big East, though, here's my opinion, and we'll do this real quick because we do have to move on. My opinion, the Big East was so top-heavy. Connecticut, Marquette, Creighton, locks. Then the bubble teams just didn't separate themselves. I actually think 3 is pretty fair. Maybe Seton Hall deserved to get in, but listen, I don't think you can complain that much. Tell Seton Hall, St. John's, and Providence, some of those bubble teams, to go out and beat some people. If you're beating everybody in the Big East, and the Big East isn't what it was maybe even a year ago, does it matter? It's kind of like the Big Ten theory. So I think maybe you got disrespected not getting an extra team or 2 in, but the 3 you have in can go win the whole damn thing. So to me, I think it's fair.
If they got 4, I wouldn't say they got disrespected at all. I'd just say it was a tough draw this year. 3 is complete disrespect in my mind. Biggie, what the fuck did FAU do this year other than beat Arizona? They just lost 3 quad 4 games. Congrats. Good for you. What the hell did Michigan State do this year? They won like 4 games at home. Congrats. Good for you. You lost James Madison, weren't punished for it at all. Just because your coach is a name. Great. I mean, what the hell did UVA do this year to earn a spot? They won a few games in They won a few games in November. Congratulations. They didn't do shit in one of the worst ACCs we've ever seen, in a dog shit conference. It's so bad that NC State somehow won the conference tournament. That's a bad NC State team. This if they got 4 in, I'm fine. 3, that's complete and utter horseshit.
It's a lot coming from a Georgetown fan.
I know when teams stink, Trevor. I am the expert on that shit, all right?
I will say the only thing that people are going to bring up, the only thing is Virginia. I'm just double checking it right now. They are undefeated in Q3 and Q4, which the committee continued to regurgitate that point. I'm not here to argue it. I'm just bringing it up because
actually create their own shot.
It's the only thing. I'm with you. Look, I'm just bringing it up for the people that are in the comments probably or watching this later who are like, what about Michigan State too? Like, that's the same thing. Q3, Q4, we all know that. That's something that they regurgitated. And then non-con strength of schedule, like I went back and forth in the last 24 hours. Like, I just don't know if it needs to be that big of a consideration. But I know this year it helps separate the field absolutely.
I think you got to play somebody though. Like if you're a big name, if you're in a power conference, you can't skate by. You have to play at least somebody, I think.
What about think about JMU then, right? So say JMU's in the Indiana State case. There was an entire John Fanta article written about how JMU couldn't play anybody because people were afraid to play them. So it's a double standard. I don't know if it's the whole you got to play somebody thing, right? Because that actually ends up hurting Michael, App States. It hurts all these teams. It hurts the Sun Belt. It hurts the SoCon. It hurts the Charlestons of the world, right? Like these teams that could be incredible. Like Charleston last year, 30-3. They didn't play anybody because nobody would be willing to play them. Kelsey had built a winner, and people were like, "No, we're not playing Charleston in freaking November. It's just not happening." So I don't want to hear the double standard thing about the play somebody. Like I get the whole point about non-con being important, but it's overrated to the point of it's actually devaluing the product long term when we get to the end.
Just imagine. Now I'll leave this because I do want to hear Phil's thoughts before we move on. Imagine if the other big schools, like if the Dukes, Kentucky, Kansas, Michigan State, Arizona, if they all had that same mindset and tried to quote unquote game the net with that, like, we're not going to play each other. We'll play good competition in the SEC or Big 12 play. And they're like, we're not going to play each other at all. We'll just skate by, blow teams out by 100 points. Who cares? So that's where it gets into it. You got, in my opinion, you have to play at least one or two good enough opponents. You can't play the blind and deaf school 12 times. Phil, your thoughts on that question about the Big East, though?
Well, I just want to go back to, I mean, we're talking about who should have been left out, for a Big East team. Why is everybody skipping over Colorado? Colorado has a worse resume than Virginia, significantly. Look at Colorado's schedule. They didn't beat anyone. They have less quad 1 wins than Virginia. They have a worse record against quad 1 and 2 than Virginia. They've beat, I believe, one tournament team. So Virginia is the team that keeps getting brought up. Colorado is the team that has no business being anywhere near this tournament. And I don't hear anybody talking about that.
I think that's a good point.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think those are good points, but that's always like with bubble teams. And think, people are actually out there trying to make this tournament. It's hard enough to find 68 quality teams. They want to make it to like 76 or 80. Imagine the crappy teams we may get in then. But let's move on. Let's finally get into some breaking down the brackets. Let's start with the East. The reigning champs got the overall #1 seed. They swept the Big East regular season and Big East tournament crowns. UConn, as the 1 seed, will play 16 Stetson. Shout out Donnie Jones. Shout out Jalen Blackman. Trev and I did a tremendous interview that's up on our YouTube channel with head coach Donnie Jones. We talk about Stetson's path. Trev, I love that interview with Donnie Jones, and I really like the Stetson team, but this could have been probably the worst possible 1 seed that they could have got for their style of play. I mean, but hey, you know what? They're in the tournament and they get to play a special team. So congratulations, right?
Jalen Blackman's going to make this game at least somewhat interesting for a stretch of about 4 minutes. One of the segments, he'll have just a moment where UConn's like, all right, whoa, let's call timeout. Let's figure out how to game this guy a little better. I don't know if he'll have 40 like he did in the A-Sun, but I honestly think this is longer than I thought we'd spend on Stetson. But yeah, shout out to Donnie Jones, who he threw the nugget out there. He coached White Chocolate. So yeah, we definitely going to have Donnie Jones back on. Good luck to Stetson, but my Lord, at least they didn't have to play it in Dayton. So good for them.
That's true. That's a good point. Fellas, when you look at this region as a whole, what stands out to you in this first round as like an exciting matchup that you're really looking forward to? DeRosa, I'll let you start on this one.
I think the first round game that stands out to me significantly is Washington State Drake. I think that's a very 50-50 game. I don't actually know who I'm predicting to win that game, frankly. I'm supposed to come on here with an expert with a ton of takes. I think that game is very 50-50. I think Tucker DeVries is probably the best individual player in this game, but Washington State's defense, they're just such a well-coached, they're a well-oiled machine, and Miles Reyes is a really good player. I think that game could go either way, and I think both teams that win that game could give Iowa State a scare. I think it's going to be very fun. I think Drake will definitely have a little bit of home crowd advantage. Shout out Chris on our show yesterday who brought that up. That was a really good point, but I think these are two really good teams. They're just really solid. And I think both teams are capable of making a Sweet 16. I think that game is the most toss-up and will just be the most fun because I think it is due to be close late and close throughout.
Phil, your Illini garner a 3 seed coming off of a Big Ten tournament championship. They're in a good spot. I actually kind of like them in the bottom half of this region. But this matchup with Morehead State is very interesting. I want to hear your thoughts on it. Do you think the Illini continue the momentum and cruise by a game Morehead State in the first round?
Yeah, I think Illinois, honestly, I like the way the bottom half of this region kind of shapes up for them. I think they're playing their best basketball of the year right now. And I think a team like Morehead State doesn't really worry me as much. I'm more worried about, I don't mean to look ahead, but a matchup against like UConn later on, a team that has a ton of size where Illinois can't really defend in the post as much. But honestly, I don't mean to dismiss Morehead State. I think Illinois cruises pretty easily in that one. My matchup that I'm kind of watching in this region is, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, that UAB and San Diego State game. Really like UAB. Think they were a little bit underseeded as a 12. I know they didn't have a great regular season, but Yexel Lendenberg is a great player. Eric Gaines has some tournament experience. I think UAB actually could end up, going on a little run here.
Peyton, what's your matchup kind of in this first round or matchups that really stand out to you in this East region?
I really like the 8-9 matchup, Florida Atlantic against Northwestern. Obviously, guard play for both teams is exceptional. Boo Buie for Northwestern and John L. Davis for Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic, they have a top 20 offense. They're 2-1 against tournament teams this season. Well, this year they beat Texas A&M, they beat Arizona, they lost to Illinois. All three of those games, they scored over 90 points, but all three of those games, they gave up pretty much over like 88 points plus. So they got great offense, great guards. The defense is not as good this season. As far as Northwestern goes, they're top 30 in offense as well. They've got a much better defense, top 75. They've played multiple tournament teams. They've played a tougher schedule than Florida Atlantic has. And they're ranked 11th in, I don't know how to pronounce his last name properly. I'm just going to say Evan Maya. I don't know if it's Maya or Mia, but I'm saying Evan Maya. EvanMyers.com, they're ranked 11th in his opponent adjust rankings, meaning they play really well against better competition. Obviously, they got Boo Buie on the floor for them. I think that's the difference maker, and I really like Northwestern's chances of beating FAU in this first-round matchup.
Trevor, I've seen you nodding your head a little bit. Do you agree with that 8-9 matchup being super intriguing?
I do, but like the whole case for FAU there is like, look, it's the same exact team from last year. I wrote about him in the magazine. I had him in this position of better than an 8 seed, I promise. I definitely thought this team was going to be way better than this. But no, I think the Northwestern thing is interesting. Like FAU isn't ranked inside the top 30 in any metric, in any computer anywhere. So it's just something I think about there from games they've played and how they adjusted. I'll be really quick on the matchup question. I figured everyone would touch on something in the first round. I think Drake's the obvious one. Looking forward to maybe a Drake Iowa State. I'll actually just say this. The fact that we're potentially going to get UConn Auburn, which is a Final Four or national championship level game in the Sweet 16, is crazy, and it furthermore speaks to the East. And then, Phil, I'd love to shout out to UAB. It was kind of going back to my point about the NIT last year with teams like valuing those competitions. Look what they did last year, right? Conference USA, FAU, these two teams are in the bracket here together. They were in that Conference USA last year. That experience was super valuable for both these teams, and now they're obviously in contention of going into the Final Four, obviously. But that talk about a coach getting paid. Andy Kennedy's going to get paid in the next 2 or 3 years from a big school. That's a guy that I think's been a sitting duck a little too long, and he's now finally proved it. So I'm really glad Phil brought up UAB, but I'll stick with UConn Auburn in the Sweet 16, and that's a national championship level. That might be the best game in that entire bracket.
Well, you actually led me into the next question for all of us. When you look ahead potentially at paths for certain teams to meet up or to maybe make the Final Four out of the East region here, Trevor already brought up a potential Sweet 16 between UConn and Auburn. We have a potential Illinois-Iowa State. Maybe upsets happen and set up some wild stuff. So what do you guys look at potential interesting paths for a certain team in this bracket? I'll start with one to give you an example. I think it would be crazy if FAU takes down Northwestern, they get UConn. You have two teams in the Final Four last year. I actually think FAU matches up a little better with UConn than Northwestern would because FAU has really good guard play and they have a big and Vlad Golden that could at least hold his own against Donovan Clingan. Imagine they get by UConn and San Diego State takes down UAB, takes down presumably Auburn. We have a rematch in the Sweet 16 of two teams that met up in the Final Four that had the moment of Trevor's life. The best moment, the number one moment in his top 10 March Madness moments. He was there to see the shot to send San Diego State to the national title game. If everything got crazy and nutty, we could see FAU, San Diego State, Sweet 16, run it back. Peyton, when you look at interesting paths like that in this East region, what stands out to you?
I really like Iowa State's path just for like storyline purposes because in the first round matchup, they play South Dakota State. TJ Otzenberger started his coaching career at South Dakota State. I don't know if many people know that. Before he went to UNLV and obviously before he ended where he's at right now with Iowa State, he started his coaching career at South Dakota State. So keep in mind for that. That's a storyline that people should not watch out for, but keep an eye on. And then if they win that second round matchup, I do think Drake beats Washington State. They'll match up with Drake, which Drake University to Iowa State University is only like 38 miles. Like it's very close in distance there. So that's an intriguing one. Obviously, Tucker DeWeeve's going against Iowa State's defensive prowess. Would be an intriguing matchup. See how Coach DeVries matches up against Iowa State and TJ Otzenberger, and then potential Sweet 16 matchup against Illinois, which I think would be very entertaining. Illinois' offense against Iowa State's defense. I really like Iowa State's path to potentially either Elite Eight or even the Final Four.
Bill, same question for you in this East region. Potential interesting paths for these teams.
Well, Peyton was just kind of talking about it. I'm really looking forward to a potential Drake and Iowa State matchup in the second round. I think Drake is the type of team, like I mentioned earlier, that can take down Iowa State. They're the number one team in the country on the defensive glass, preventing offensive boards. So, and then, like I mentioned, DeVries is going to be the best player on the court, in my opinion, on that court. So I have no issue with picking Drake there. I'm probably going to pick Drake there. And then I like Illinois' path if it plays out that way. I sort of mentioned I like how the bottom half of this region plays out for Illinois. I think, they match up well with Iowa State, even if that's how it plays out. But I think Illinois ends up coming out of the bottom half of this bracket.
DeRosa, same thing with you.
Yeah, I see the comment on the screen. I was going to talk about my Mighty Mormons. I think BYU comes out and lays an absolute smackdown to Duquesne. I don't think that game is close at all. Then they match up with Illinois. I think that's a very interesting game because BYU has gone up against teams that are as athletic, as physical as Illinois. They've done with varying success. Sometimes they're really good, sometimes they're not. Illinois' defense is predicated on making you beat them one-on-one and not letting you shoot threes. BYU's offense doesn't beat you one-on-one and loves to shoot threes. And I'll tell you right now, that's an excellent defense versus an excellent offense. That contrast is really interesting. Then let's say if BYU can win that game, I think they're probably fighting a bit of an uphill battle. But let's say they can in a team that probably not many people are going to pick to win that game. They play against Iowa State. And in their 2 games against Iowa State, in the game in Provo, BYU beat the piss out of them, beat them by 15. Then in the game at Iowa State at the very end of the season, that game was really competitive. I mean, we look at this BYU team. They run really intricate offense. They have shooters at all 5 spots on the floor. That's a team that is really hard to prepare for on short notice. So I think this BYU team could make a run. It wouldn't surprise me. The con is they are not athletic in the slightest, and Illinois could just run them, and they do not have a matchup for TJ Shannon. Not at all.
Shout out to Colton Henderson for that question. Keep them coming, guys. Also, shout out to the 202 people that have been tuning in. Let's keep that number pumping as well. We thank you for that. Let's move. Last thing for the East region here before we move on to our next region. Actually, sorry, last 2 things. We'll make them real quick, though. Who should be on upset watch in this region? It may go chalk. We know how this thing works. It may go chalk when we think it gets crazy. But what one team in this region should be on upset watch the most? Peyton, we'll start with you.
Shit. I'm kind of briefly mentioned it yesterday with all the House Enterprise guys. People will think I'm crazy, but I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it would not shock me if UConn loses in the second round game to Northwestern, or even if they lose in the Sweet 16 game against Auburn. I think Northwestern with Boo Buie, the key, they can pit Donovan Clingan in ball screen actions and get mismatches, and he can just attack. With him playing drop coverage, they can just attack him for 40 minutes, and that's going to be the way they're going to have to beat this UConn team. You have to be able to score. I think Northwestern, and I've seen it too many times, a guy who's like a Boo Buie go off like any time in this tournament. Carson Edwards did it in 2019. Led his team to the Elite Eight. Probably should have led him to the Final Four that year. Boo Buie, I think he's the guy. He will attack Donovan Clingan. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but man, UConn, like you mentioned earlier, they do not have an easy region, an easy path to the Final Four this year. I think Northwestern could potentially get them.
Trev, who should be on upset watch in the East?
I'm going to contradict everything I just said in my last point. I'm just going to make that clear right now. I was going to say it with a straight face. There's just no way it came out that way. San Diego State can absolutely beat Auburn. We're one Jaden Ledee type of just breakout game from Auburn going home the round of 32, setting up a San Diego State UConn matchup, which obviously would be a national championship rematch, which I think would be incredible. So I think Auburn is my answer, and it's because of San Diego State. But like Phil said, they got to get through UAB. I do think they're better than UAB, and I think they'll get it done. But I think San Diego State can beat Auburn in the round of 32.
To make your point even more on that, Auburn this year has struggled with teams that actually guard them back and make their guards have to make shots. San Diego State is very capable of doing that. Question being for both of them, who makes enough shots? Because it may be the first one to 55 wins, but I don't think that's out of the realm possibility. DeRosa, who should be on upset watch?
For upset watch, Trevor picked a 5 over a 4. I just want to make that very clear. He picked a
Okay. All
Good
right.
point. I'm so glad
All
you
right.
told him on that.
All right. You get my point, though. You get my point.
Yeah, so just looking at it, I don't love any of the first round upsets, honestly. Because I'm not a 10 over a 7 is not a big upset. Like, great, that's a 50-50 game.
We
I
go
don't
down the
think-
road then.
I don't think Duquesne beats BYU. I don't think UAB beats San Diego State. I think Auburn beats the piss out of Yale. Morehead State, I think, could cover in the game against Illinois, but I don't think they win it. So, yeah, we're going to go down the road. I'm going to go game 2. I think Iowa State could lose to either Washington State or Drake. Iowa State plays really slow. Both those teams can play in that style of game. Tucker DeVries can hit shots, or Washington State's a really well-coached team too. And I think in most games, Washington State would be at like a significant talent disadvantage versus a 1 or a 2 seed. I don't think they really are against Iowa State. I think Iowa State is a very talented team, don't get me wrong. But I don't think Iowa State is one of those teams that has like overwhelming amounts of like 5-star level talent, multiple NBA kind of guys. I think that's a game Washington State can kind of match up with. Iowa State's just kind of a better version of Washington State. And if Washington State's just hitting shots that day, it could go either way. So I think both those teams could take Iowa State. So I'm going to go round 2, Iowa State.
Phil, who's on upset watch?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of spoiled my answer, and then DeRosa just kind of stole it. But I think Iowa State goes down in round 2 to Drake. I just think, DeRosa mentioned it, Iowa State's kind of style of play is very slow, and then they're also just not that efficient on, like, at least Houston plays slow and they're pretty damn efficient on offense. Iowa State's just not a very good offensive team. So if they get into a single possession or a couple possession game with Drake, I think Drake actually has the advantage there as well. So I like Drake to steal that game.
And mine, as I alluded to it off air last night, but Phil, I've seen Morehead State in person. They will control tempo. Illinois wants to get up and down. Morehead State, especially in tournament games, it's much easier to control tempo than it is to try to speed an experienced team up. They've got good guards in Drew Thelwell, and they've got a budding superstar in Riley Minix that will absolutely abuse smaller guards in the post, and bigger guys, they'll take them out three-point line, beat them off the bounce, and shoot threes. He is a walking double waiting to happen and could go off for 30, 35 in any given night. I think if Illinois is not careful, Morehead State being an experienced team that controls tempo and makes shots, I think Morehead State is primed to at least give Illinois all they want and more, maybe be right there for the upset. I think Illinois is on upset watch. Let's move on finally. Let's go over to the South region where Houston is the number 1 seed in this region. We talked about Marquette being the 2, Kentucky 3, Duke the 4. That is your top 5 seeds. Fellas, when you look at the South region here, again, some exciting matchups, interesting paths for teams here in the South region.
All right, I'll just get it out of the way. I'll just get it out of the way. James Madison can beat Wisconsin. James Madison can beat Duke or Vermont, and James Madison can beat matched up against Houston in the Sweet 16.
Yep, that was going to be
Peyton?
mine as well. That was 100% going to be mine as well. I really like the JMU squad. They won 30 games this year, which I don't care if you're a mid-major or high major. To win 30 games in college basketball, that's an incredible accomplishment. And I think they match up really well against Wisconsin. Wisconsin cannot defend. They got a pretty good offense, but other than that, I don't like Wisconsin at all. And I just don't like picking Big Ten teams in general in this tournament because I just don't like their style of play. I think James Madison beats Wisconsin. I do think Duke gets beat by James Madison in the second round. Everything I've said about Duke in the past week and a half has pretty much been true. They're soft. They have inconsistent guards. I don't like their bench depth. I think JMU gets them the second round, and then we'll see what happens when they meet up against Houston in the Sweet 16.
Phil, it's Colton Henderson again in the live chat on Facebook says James Madison screams Marquette. Murray State with Ja, everyone sees it coming. He's talking about James Madison being the 12 and Wisconsin being the 5. I mean, that's an interesting, sexy, potentially 12 over 5. I mean, interesting paths, stuff that sticks out to you in the South region.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you should overlook Vermont. I know Duke is a supremely talented team and will definitely have a lot more talent on the floor in that game, but Vermont's battle-tested. They beat Charleston early in the year, beat St. Louis early in the year. They've been to the tournament however many years in a row now. John Becker is probably the best coach in the Northeast. And, Shamir Bogues was at a high major school, transferred down. He's a dog defensively. probably the best defensive guard in this bracket. I think Vermont could steal that game.
DeRosa, Vermont's won 10 in a row. They've got the 4th active winning streak in the nation. The only thing that scares me about a potential Vermont over Duke in this situation is they don't shoot the 3 quite as well as past Vermont teams did. They're shooting about 33.5%, ranks 201 in the nation on KenPom. If they shot the 3 a couple percentage points better, let's say they were at like 36, 37, maybe like old Vermont teams, I think that they could take down the Blue Devils. But I worry about that size and shooting, but I guess in a 1-game tournament, they could get hot for a game.
Yeah, I actually think Duke beats the piss out of them. I think Duke's more talented significantly at every position, and I don't think they have even a matchup for Filipowski. I think that's a Duke game all day, and I think it sets up well. I've made 2 bets in this region. I have Duke covering the spread there, and I have James Madison beating Wisconsin. James Madison's just better than Wisconsin in my mind. Wisconsin played really well in the Big Ten tournament. I don't want to discredit them there. But aside from that game, I don't think Wisconsin has played all that well for the last 2 months, really. So am I really going to change the way a team is played solely because they beat Purdue? Because Purdue decided not to guard inside the arc up 2 with 2 seconds left? No, I'm not. I think James Madison just beats Wisconsin outright. I don't think that game is all that close. So yeah, those are the 2 games I'm particularly confident in. And if we look to the second round, just briefly, Florida Marquette is going to be a ton of fun.
Oh my God. That's a whole lot of offense. And the last thing I'll say on Wisconsin, then Trevor, I'll let you have your point. Wisconsin is like that team every year that I'm very wary of that gets hot, even though they didn't win the Big Ten tournament title, Illinois did. But think of like Iowa the last couple years, or just name a team that gets hot in the conference tournament and everybody gets excited about. Vanderbilt 2012 is a great example. They got like a 4 seed that year, knocking Kentucky out in the SEC tournament final. Everybody's like, man, they're experienced. They can shoot. They're red hot right now. And they lost the first game in the NCAA tournament. Iowa a couple years ago, same thing. Runs through the Big Ten tournament. Everybody's like, man, the way they shoot, the way they score, They get beat by Richmond. So Wisconsin feels like they're in that same mold that they get hot and play well in the Big Ten tournament. And then they're going to drop the first game in the NCAA tournament. Just something to keep an eye on. Trev, go ahead with your thought there.
I don't know if it'll come up again in the way we have the format laid out. So Michael just mentioned about the Florida Marquette potential matchup there. I actually think that it might get really interesting. I don't know if it even might be Florida there, and I'll tell you why. So 10 out of the last 11 years, a team in the first 4 has won a game in the NCAA tournament. And I think Colorado, as I know Phil's not a big fan of them with the resume, but I think the matchup fell perfectly for them. I think if they can get through Boise State, who I think just was ridiculously underseeded. I think it's ridiculous. All the Mountain West teams got seeded the way they did, specifically Colorado having to play Boise State. If they can make it out of Dayton, they can absolutely give Florida problems with no Micah. They have an incredible front court with De Silva and with Lampkin. I think they'll be able to match up really, really well. And then obviously that'll set up Marquette to have to play I feel like a little underseeded Colorado team where Shaka Smart hasn't been past the round of 32, we know, since he obviously went to the Final Four with VCU. So it might not, Marquette might have a nice little path to the round, Sweet 16 here, and I'm taking Colorado. That'll be a team that I am looking forward to do that, as well as I'm normally historically a guy in brackets that isn't. I'm the one that misses the first 4. I feel like people would go out of their way to be like, there's a first 4 team that can make at least a couple of games. And then I found out the 10 out of 11 stat. I think it's Colorado. I think they give Florida problems, and I think they made the round of 32.
I love that shout, especially Florida loses their big man in the middle last night, Micah Hanlon.
It's the biggest reason I made it, by the way. Biggest reason.
And Colorado's got Eddie Lampkin. They've got size. I think Florida's well equipped to battle that, though. Because, again, Tyree Samuel's playing out of his mind coming in from Seton Hall. I think that's an interesting game. I don't hate the pick. I think Florida's offense is a little too much, but we'll get to that. Phil, how ironic is this? We did that great interview with Longwood's senior guard, D.A. Houston, last week. It's on the YouTube channel. Go check it out after this if you haven't already. Phil and I sat down with D.A. Houston. Keep in mind, his last name's Houston. He's from Houston, Texas. And the last question Phil and I asked him during this interview, we said, all right, DA, imagine you're a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament, and let's pick, I don't know, Houston, for example. And it's a tie game, Longwood ball, game on the line, who takes the last shot? And he thought about it, and I said, come on, man. There's one answer. He goes, yeah, you're right. I got to shoot it. And then I'll be damned, Phil, if we don't get Houston versus Longwood in the 116, DA Houston from Houston, Texas, playing Houston in the first round, are we prophets or what?
Yeah, unbelievable. And honestly, Houston should take this game pretty easily, but this is going to be a nasty game. This is a game that kind of matches up and is going to be gross to watch. You know, they both play slow. They both like to turn you over. They both like to hit the glass. Houston will pull away because they're the more talented team, but this is going to be a nasty game for a little while.
I agree with that. So let's look at some potential paths again. I know you guys have talked about potentially either Colorado Marquette, Marquette's down the road, maybe Florida Marquette. I'm salivating at the thought of Florida Marquette because I'll save that for a minute, but Florida Marquette would be extreme offense. I love the idea of Nebraska Texas A&M elite guard play with Boogs Radford and Wade Taylor against Keisei Tominaga from Nebraska, Rink Mass from Nebraska. One of those two, whoever wins that, I think will give Houston all they want and more, especially Houston being hobbled. I want to ask, speaking of Tominaga and Wade Taylor, I want to go around just real quick. Give me a player or two in this bracket to be on Star Watch that can really make a big name for themselves, or a bigger name if they've already got one, during this region through the NCAA tournament. Peyton, give me a name or two real quick.
I think for me, for this region, I think it's Wade Taylor, because he can get hot at any given moment. I'm pretty sure they played Houston earlier in the year, and I'm pretty sure he had 30 points against Houston earlier in the season. Like, he's that capable. Like, when he's on, it's get out of the way and just give him the ball and let him go cook for 40 minutes, because it's a sight to see. In an NCAA format like this, I wouldn't shock me if he can lead his team to potentially maybe a Sweet 16. That second round matchup, if they beat Nebraska, which would be an interesting game. Who knows? Maybe they could give Houston the game in the second round. But yeah, I think Wade Taylor is the answer for me.
Trevor?
Look, I told Peyton I was going to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and do it now since it's not going to happen. I don't know if we'll get to it the rest of this region for upset watch. But I'll give you a name, and it's Trey Townsend for Oakland. Trey Townsend is an incredible player. I'm just also going to give you a reason why. He's going to be the reason if Oakland is a 14-3 upset, although I don't think this actually happens. Let me be completely clear. 14-3, Trey Townsend leads the Oakland, whatever they are, Bears, to a Kentucky 14-3 upset. Here's the reason. The offense is incredible for Oakland. They rake in the top 135 in every single KenPom efficiency stat, except for free throw rate. But Kentucky, free throw rate, not exactly the greatest stat for them either. They're very close in that regard. I think this actually, matchup-wise, from an offensive statistics standpoint, is a really close matchup there. And ultimately, if I can't pick DJ Burns, I feel like that's too obvious of an answer. He'll be the darling in this bracket.
Oh, he'll be the darling.
If they make any kind of noise. Obviously, he's a name that people were already, talking about. I'll give you an underrated one. It's Trey Townsend.
I like that. And by the way, you're right. DJ Burns, people already love him. Anytime a big man can do what he does, and I'm talking a big man, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is not in because Indiana State got left out. Now everybody's turned their attention to DJ Burns. I love that. DeRosa, player or two to watch that could become a household name from this region.
Yeah, I'm not picking Oakland. Western Kentucky, the 15, would beat Oakland, the 14, by at least double digits. So let's get a little interesting. I think the most boring answer I could give is Tyler Kolek, just because, I don't know, like guards control games in March. They win 3 games. They get to a Sweet 16. They get to an Elite 8. Like after he beats Kentucky, if that happens, yeah, people are just going to be like, oh, wow, that white guy's pretty good. So it could be Tyler Kolek. Give me, if we want to go a deeper sleeper, sorry, Trev, how about Pop Isaacs?
There you go.
God damn you, DeRosa. You guys have mentioned every fucking player in this bracket.
Yeah,
hey,
like they Rob Dillingham.
DeRosa drug my Trey Townsend pick through the mud. That's a sleeper if you've ever heard of one. I figured that was at least worth a shout.
All right, well, you know what? I'll go a little deeper. How about Tyson Dagenhart? I don't know. Why not?
Woo! That's a good one. I like that.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that. Phil, Pop Isaacs, is that still the answer? Or you guys
you guys didn't leave me with anybody. You guys named the starting 5 for every team in the bracket.
No, there's a few.
I was gonna go Pop Isaacs, but I guess if nobody's gonna mention Reed Shepherd, he's probably already a household name at this point. Best shooter in the country. he won't be the number 1 pick in the draft. I don't care what Kevin O'Connor or whoever the fuck.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
But yeah, Reed Shepherd, I could very easily see just having a huge tournament and becoming America's darling.
I can't believe I'm going to say a Dookie, but get to know Jared McCain. I've said it for a couple of weeks now.
Yeah.
That kid, I could see him against Vermont, and if they play Wisconsin, James Madison, let's say if Duke makes a run, Jared McCain, his athleticism is going to pop off the charts, and he will pull from 30 feet, and once he sees one go in, it'll come in waves. I think that kid is primed for a big march if Duke advances far, and I think you're going to know the name Jared McCain, the freshman. Keep an eye out on him. Real quick, before we move away from the South and start transitioning to other regions, upset watch. Who in this region, whether it be the first round, second round, whenever, who in this region should be on upset watch? Phil, we'll go back to you since everybody stole your ideas for players.
I mean, like I said, I actually kind of like Vermont, and I like James Madison a lot less than everybody else does. I think James Madison is that kind of pick every year that everybody picks, and then they get blown out by 20 points. But I think Vermont could put some pressure on the Duke guards, could turn him over. And, DeRosa's right. They don't really have a matchup for Filipowski, but I don't know. I like their guard play enough to match up with Duke and potentially steal it.
I like that. DeRosa, we'll go reverse order back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to make someone else make the difficult answer. James Madison's winning that game outright. They're just more talented in my mind, honestly, at this point. AJ Storr might be looking for a way out. Wisconsin just kind of fell apart to me to end the season. I think James Madison's just kind of the better team, and I think the better team is not favored in this game. I think this is a James Madison win. I'm very confident James Madison wins this game, frankly.
Trevor?
Ditto. DeRosa, Peyton?
Shit, I don't want.
I'm teeing you up for what you texted me about yesterday because I'm not going to be the one to do it. So you got it, buddy.
I know who you're going with.
Say it. Say it.
Kentucky beats Oakland in the first round, even though Oakland has played a ridiculous schedule, by the way. I checked that shit out last night.
I forgot to bring that up. Thank
you.
They
played like Ohio State, Illinois, they played at Xavier. Yeah, they played a ridiculous schedule.
Not only is it the schedule, though, listen to these results, right? Ohio State opened the year 79-73 loss. Illinois, 64-53 loss. When that happened, we were all talking about the Horizon League like, oh, my God, this is going to be an incredible league, and it was. They played Drake, 85-77 neutral against Drake. Drake, by the way, was 10 seed in this tournament. Even Marshall was a decent game there. Xavier, who was 56 in Kempom, I know they didn't obviously turn out so great. They beat Xavier 78-76. And then Michigan State 79-62. Dayton 91-67 was really the only bad blip there. And then they started conference playoff and they just went nuclear. That's incredible.
Anytime you have a veteran team that shoots a three like that and they play a 2-3 zone, which first game of the tournament for young guys, I mean, I don't blame you if you go Oakland over Kentucky. I really don't.
Hold up. I'm not doing that. I think Kentucky wins the game. If they lose the first round game, Cal needs a protection service on him because BBN would just crucify him. But I don't think they're going to lose the first round game. I do think they lose the second round game. I know this is contradicting to anything I said 2 weeks ago. So Josh, whoever wants to make fun of me for that, go ahead. I'll take it. But Kentucky, whether it's Texas Tech or NC State, I think one of those teams beat Kentucky in the second round. And here's why. I think Kentucky is very, very similar to Gonzaga from 3-4 years ago. Elite offense, elite guards, lackluster defense majority of the times, and they don't do well when teams are playing physical against them. And it's shown this year. They lost to Florida. They lost to A&M, the SEC tournament. They lost to Tennessee in their own building. They lost Gonzaga. All those teams, besides maybe Gonzaga, was physical with them. And that's something, with them being inexperienced, that's something that I think is going to cost them a march. How's the refereeing going to be officiated? That's going to play a key factor. I think I have Texas Tech beating NC State, and I have Texas Tech beating Kentucky. But NC State, their experience, they've got the 15th in experience, according to KenPom. And obviously, they're playing really hot right now, probably one of the hottest teams in the country coming into this tournament. Either way, whether it's Texas Tech or NC State, I think they upset Kentucky in the second round.
Listen, if NC State gets by Texas Tech in that 6-11 and Kentucky does beat Oakland, watching Kentucky's bigs try to defend DJ Burns will be hilarious television for 40 minutes. It'll be absolutely, but it'd also be funny watching NC State have to guard Kentucky's guard, so it's a trade-off. But my upset, I don't know who comes out of Nebraska, Texas A&M. I'll probably lean Texas A&M because of the experience. I like their guard play a little better, but Nebraska shoots the hell out of the ball when they get hot. I think whoever wins that, for various reasons, takes Houston out in the second round. I'm just saying Houston's hobbled. We've seen now, will A&M and Nebraska play as good a defense on them as Iowa State did? Chances are probably not. But we've said it pretty much all year, kind of the thing that concerns us about Houston. Not only are they injured, like hobbled and depleted right now, if I could spit it out, but if Cryer and She do not make shots, if they do not make, particular from the outside, they are very beatable. Very beatable. A&M with their guards, Taylor can get red hot, so can Boogs Radford, and then Nebraska just spreads you out, bury you from three, and they've got a big inside their own that can handle his own a little bit. Whoever it is, Nebraska, Texas A&M, I think Houston's on upset alert. I don't know if they get out of the first weekend. How about that for an upset? There was one other thing. Oh, yeah. Potential paths, too. Like, I love that Florida Marquette game, like I said. And if we could get Kentucky Duke in the Elite Eight for old time's sakes, that would make me really happy. Anything last thing real quick on the South before we move on? Because we got
talking about potential paths. Really quick, Marquette. Kentucky has a history of losing to Marquette in tournaments. I know that doesn't carry over against, the same coach and staff, same players. I get it. But the 90s, they had a loss there. I didn't get the exact year. 2003 D-Wade triple-double game. And then Jimmy Butler, that team also beat Kentucky as well in the first round. So definitely some interesting things to think about from a storyline perspective there.
I completely agree. Before we continue this tournament talk and move on to the Midwest region where number one seed Purdue lies and tries to avoid the pitfalls of previous years, we have a word from a new sponsor here at ECB and the House of College Hoops brand here, and we're talking about Rhythm. You already know March is filled with unpredictability, thrilling upsets, and all-around madness. But what if AI could help you craft an awesome bracket and win some bets? Enter Rhythm, the AI sports betting app for player props and game picks. Rhythm stands at the forefront of innovation, offering sports enthusiasts a cutting-edge tool to elevate their bracket building experience. The app leverages data sets, historical trends, player statistics, and more to help craft the perfect bracket and picks for you. If you head to the link in our bio on X, as well as house-enterprise.com, you can sign up for free to build your perfect bracket that will help you conquer March. Download Rhythm, spelled RITHMM. Create your account, generate your free AI tourney bracket, and win big. Disclaimer, House Enterprise and Rhythm are not responsible for any lost wages on picks made. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem, DeRosa? Please call 1-800-GAMBLER. That is, again, go download the Rhythm app. Guys, free AI to help build your perfect bracket. Go to house-enterprise.com. Check the House Enterprise bio and their Twitter page there for more information. Download the app. Go use it. It's good to be partnered with places like this and apps like this. It's March, especially if you're gamblers like me and DeRosa. You need all the help you can get because as much as we give you all this information, March gets nuts. But use data to put to work for you in these brackets. Go download Rhythm now. Let's move on to the Midwest. I talked about it. Purdue, the one seed in the Midwest. We know what happened to them last year, right? We have actually known what's happened to them the last handful of years. Purdue fans feel like they're the most cursed fans in college basketball. Every year that they have a good team that could make a run, you go back to 94 with Glenn Robinson, the big dog. They were a top 2 seed in their region. They roll over Kansas, and then the big dog gets hurt before the Elite Eight game down there in Knoxville. Duke knocks them out. Then a couple years ago, Carson Edwards goes nuts, helps take out Tennessee, goes nuts against Virginia, had them dead to rights where he drops 40-some on them, and Virginia sneaks by in overtime. Last year, they're the 1 seed. We know what happened to FDU. A couple years ago, the path opens up. They lose to St. Peter. So same story, different year for Purdue. Fellas, when I look at this region, though, I like Purdue to cruise to the Elite Eight potentially. But when you look at this bracket as a whole, there's a couple juicy higher seed upsets I think is waiting to happen. Trevor, we'll start with you. When you look at the Midwest, Purdue's region, potential upsets in here. What do you see when you look at the Midwest?
Yeah, this is the one I have that, I mean, I know I mentioned the West being the most volatile, but like, look, I have 12 and a 13 playing each other. I sorry, Kansas, but I have Samford beating Kansas, and then I have McNeese beating the completely overseeded 5 seed Gonzaga Bulldogs, who are not deep whatsoever. That McNeese team is. So talking about pass, I think that does open it up a little bit. I know everybody's picking TCU as a potential upset for Purdue because of the fast style of play and the potential just physicality standpoint. But at Utah State team, I've said it all day and yesterday that the Mountain West got screwed. And we're going to look at the fact that San Diego State's probably going to make it the farthest, or New Mexico, and we're going to sit here and tell you like, oh my God, here's the resume thing or whatever. But Utah State has a huge chance as an underseeded team to beat Purdue in that second round. So Purdue, in my eyes, actually, in my bracket, I have them playing McNeese in the Sweet 16. So there's my path for Purdue, just giving you an idea of, I do think that they're set up for an easier path, quote unquote. I think the teams around them are interesting. But yeah, I mean, we're basically on a collision course for a Purdue Tennessee or Purdue Creighton. I think that's what we're on the path for, and that's really what I ultimately landed on.
Phil, DeRosa, Peyton, your guys' thoughts on the Midwest?
I'll go next since Trevor wanted to mention every upset in this bracket I was potentially thinking about doing. I'll just go ahead and mention my top upset. The Sanford-Kansas game does worry me a lot because Sanford, one of the fastest teams in the country. They press a lot. That's going to give us issues, especially if we're not ready for it, and specifically if Kevin McCullough is not healthy enough. But I do think we'll be able to get by him, even if Hunter Dickinson's not full healthy. I think McCullough would be close to being full healthy as he gets. So I think we'll get past Sanford in a hard-fought game. But the upset that I am guaranteed that's going to happen, I'll put my money on it. McNeese is beating Gonzaga. There's no chance in hell Gonzaga should be a 5 seed. Explain to me how we go from 2 months ago from them to not being potentially in the tournament to now we fast forward to 2 months now, and now they're a 5 seed. Someone to explain that to me, because it makes zero sense. They went from not being in the NCAA tournament or having conversations for that to going to the West Coast Conference has not been good this year, and now they're a 5 seed. That makes zero sense. Either way, Shahada Wells, he can go get you 30. He had 27 in the Southland Championship game. Kid's phenomenal. He can stroke it from 3. He can play at all 3 levels. And Christian Schumite has had he's been on SportsCenter top 10 like 7 times this season with some of the dunks he's done this year. So those 2 guys, and what Will Wade has done, he has experience of winning at least sometimes in March. I think McNeese beats Gonzaga pretty comfortably, to be honest.
Yeah, I think just to start, the reason Gonzaga is a 5 is actually because the Mighty Mormons of BYU cannot play on Sunday. And in the second round, they would have had to play on Sunday if they get that far. And BYU, as an institution, can't play on Sunday. So BYU would have been this 5. Instead, they are a 6 because they can't play games ever on Sunday. So that was the reason there. Granted,
isn't that crazy, by the way? I mean, that's crazy.
Honorary Mormon, Michael DeRosa.
Hey, I love my Mormons. I love my Mormons, man. Yeah, I can't be a Mormon, but I love the Mormons.
I give you full credit. We texted in November about when State lost to them, and I was really mad because I thought we were better than them coming into the year, and you made the clear case for and it held up incredibly well. So good credit to you on BYU.
You get lucky sometimes. But just looking at this region, you guys mentioned Kansas Samford. I think if Dickinson plays, I think Kansas kind of kills Samford inside. Samford doesn't really have any real size. Chor, is their 5-man. I think they can't handle Dickinson, and McCullough, just the size Kansas will have up front, I think would take advantage there. And plus, you give Bill Self 6 days to prepare for a game. Bill Self's winning that game. You look at McNeese Gonzaga. I'm not as sold on McNeese Gonzaga as you guys seem to be. That's definitely one game I want to look into a little more, just because Gonzaga's 6 is really talented. I think we get Kansas coming out of that little bracket very easily. I'm going to go with the 6-11 game. I think Oregon beats South Carolina. I think N'Faly Dante is the best player on the floor in that game. And I think Jackson Shelstead might just be the best guard on the floor in that game. I think they're kind of a little more talented. I think they're finally getting healthy. I think this game sets up really well for Oregon. I think this is a good matchup. I got the Ducks in this one.
Yeah, that's who I was going with as well. Nobody had mentioned it so far. Like you said, South Carolina just can't match up with Dante down low. He's going to have a significant size advantage. He's playing his best basketball of the year. So I think Oregon kind of cruises in that one.
Yeah, Oregon's an interesting. I mean, they're down to 8 scholarship players between injuries that's been out for the year, or dismissals and all that. and they got hot at the right time. Final Pac-12 as we know it, conference champions. So they'll forever be remembered as Pac-12 champions. But I mean, again, guys, I think Purdue, for all their bad luck, how can you not, if you're a Boiler fan, I think you got to be feeling pretty good about the draw. You get to stay in Indianapolis in the first 2 games in the first weekend. I mean, Utah State, they don't shoot it as great from 3 as they have in past. TCU could present some problems for them with their athleticism and guards, the way they pressure the basketball. I worry about Purdue historically with Braden Smith and company turning the ball over against pressure, but you got to feel good about them getting out of Indianapolis and moving on to Detroit for the Sweet 16. And then you're going to play either Gonzaga, McNeese we talked about. Shahada Wells is awesome, but is he enough to beat Purdue? Kansas is hobbled. Samford shoots the hell out of 3. But again, the point being, I like Purdue getting all the way to the Elite 8 pretty comfortably. It's the bottom half is where things get interesting in this Midwest. With Tennessee, man, you've got Texas. You could potentially see a Rick Barnes special. Tennessee, Texas in the second round in Charlotte, where close to where Rick Barnes was born. He's from Hickory, North Carolina. And then Creighton as the 3. Do you guys foresee, who do you think ends up, if Purdue makes it to the Elite 8, who do you think they see more likely? Creighton as the 3 or Tennessee as the 2? Who's more likely to win that game to face Purdue in the Elite 8?
Tennessee.
Yeah, Vols.
Is that only because Dalton Connect?
No, I think this is, we've said it all year. It's a Tennessee team that's built to win in March.
Yeah.
And it's a Creighton
offense.
team that doesn't really have great guard play, and I think Tennessee can take advantage of that. Tennessee's going to pressure them all game. I think Sakai Ziegler is going to make Stephen Ashworth's life hell, and I think they have the pieces to not make Kalkbrenner all that effective inside. They have some bigs who can either muscle you around physically or can kind of step out and like make a couple plays that completely kills the way Creighton tries to defend, and they have no matchup for Dalton Connect. Shireman's a good defender, but he's not a Connect. He's a level athlete. He's just not.
Trey Alexander era, sure. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Alexander's not going to guard him, though. Alexander's too small.
No. You said guard, not great guard play.
He's more a wing.
Yeah.
Theoretically,
Fair.
Phil, if we got that as a Sweet 16 game, Creighton and Tennessee, let's theorize here. Baylor Shireman, if you were Coach McDermott, with the size, I think Shireman at 6'7" could give Connect some problems, but you're running the risk of him picking up fouls because Connect, head down driver, can pull up on a dime for a mid-range, can bust you from 3. Do you risk, especially early in the game, your best player and best scorer getting maybe 2 fouls early and having to sit down when Creighton doesn't have a deep bench at all?
No, you can't. And this is where Creighton's missing a guy like Kaluma, having a guy who's a little bit more athletic that they'd be able to throw against Connect. But I mean, everything everybody said makes a ton of sense as far as Tennessee goes, matching up with Creighton. But I still Creighton has that potential to get so hot from 3 between Shireman and Ashworth. They're one of the best 2-point shooting teams in the country. I mean, I could see a situation where that gets away from Tennessee early and they just don't have enough offense to catch up. But I mean, matchups definitely favor Tennessee.
What if I told you, I know you guys picked Oregon, but again, to me, Oregon, especially only 8 scholarship guys this time of the year is going to start wearing on them. They feel like what I said about Wisconsin, getting hot in conference tournament. You have a couple days off to come back down to earth a little bit. And I still really like the South Carolina team. I mean, what Lamont Paris has done, we've talked about it all year. They play at a pace that you can't speed them up. They've got guards who make shots. And they've got, when Colin Murray Boyles started to develop as a real inside threat, both offensively and defensively, completely changed them. I mean, it takes a minute to scout and play against a team that slows the pace down and controls it as much as South Carolina does. And it frustrates the hell out of you when you have to play defense for 28 seconds and South Carolina, like Michi Johnson or somebody, buries a 3. What if I told you South Carolina makes it to the Sweet 16 to have a rematch with Tennessee? Do you feel that's more likely of South Carolina making a run to the Sweet 16 or Kansas making a run to the Elite 8?
The former, not the latter.
Here's the thing. I have South Carolina playing Tennessee. I think South Carolina beats Oregon, and I think they turn around and beat Creighton in the second round because having only a day and a half to prepare for South Carolina style, the defensive grinded out type of style. That's a bitch to do. And I think South Carolina beats Creighton, and I think they go on, and I think they lose to Tennessee in a close one. But I do think South Carolina beats Creighton in the second round.
Real quick, we have a special guest on DeRosa. Phil, I know you both went Oregon, but what do you think about that?
I don't think either happens like at all. I guess South Carolina's the more likely one, but zero confidence.
Yeah, I don't have any confidence in either of those situations. I'd go with Kansas if I had to choose one, because like I said, I think South Carolina loses in the first round. But yeah, I don't think either is happening.
Well, let's welcome on our first special guest of the evening on the ECB tournament show here. He's been on before. It's been a little while. Fellow Packer Nation. By the way, what are we getting rid of Aaron Jones for? But Mr. Eric Haslam from HaslamMetrics.com. Eric, we're currently talking about the Midwest region right now. When you look at Purdue, obviously we discussed their pitfalls and pretty much their whole history since 1980, coming up short when they have good teams, getting bounced early when they have good teams, paths opening up, and they've fallen short as well. To me, in my opinion, this bracket sets up beautifully if you're a Purdue fan to at least get to Elite Eight, and then you'd have a tough one, whether it be Tennessee, Creighton, or whoever it may be. When you look at Purdue in the Midwest, do you feel the same way that this is really a favorable draw for the Boilermakers?
Well, I think some of the same pitfalls for Purdue are going to still be lingering around. Now, my concern last year they were one of three teams that kind of had the fingerprint of a team that was a national champion last year, from my metrics, you have to be top 10 offensive efficiency, top 35 defensive efficiency. Only three teams had that last year. Purdue was one of them. They're also in that club this year, but I had reservations about Purdue last year just because you were dealing with a couple of young guards, two freshman guards in Smith and Lawyer, who really had not been under the hot lights of March at that point. The other concern that I had at the time was the over-reliance on Edey. Now, the first issue that I had is a little bit, been fixed because those guys have had a whole year under their belts. They're basically 2 full years of play. The over-reliance on Edey is still a little bit of a problem. You saw that was a little bit of exposed in that game with Wisconsin, where and on top of that, a lot of, I'm a Wisconsin fan. I try to be objective, but in the same vein, there were a lot of calls that went Zach Edey's game his way in that game. My concern for Purdue is, are they going to get those calls? And all of a sudden, if Zach Edey falls in foul trouble and you're sitting there with 3 fouls with 5 minutes to play, does Purdue have enough to get there in any of these games? Because once you get to the second round, nobody's a pushover anymore. So if all of a sudden Edey's in foul trouble, granted, it's a little bit different story. I think Lance Jones brings a little bit of a different dynamic that Purdue did not have last year. That's a little bit more of an offensive oomph that they lacked against Fairleigh Dickinson last year. But still, there's that element of, if Zach Edey is not there, they're a completely different team. If they get in foul trouble, they find themselves struggling a little bit more. And I think that still could bite them in this tournament.
Well, that's a good point, too. And by the way, 100% of fouling Zach Edey. You can't bowl over a set defender. I mean, he does get – that's another discussion for another day. But you are right, though, because we talk about a lot. Tournament refs, they call it a little different. A lot of time they let you play. So the calls that Edey and other players may get in the Big Ten where it's more physical, I think it's kind of a shock to the system when they get to the tournament and teams are more wide open and there's more freedom of movement and stuff. I want to ask you one more on Purdue, and then I'll let the guys take over with some stuff for you. When you look at Purdue, now I mentioned that I think that they can potentially cruise to the Elite Eight, but this is all contingent. Again, can they adapt to different styles, teams that want to play up and down and pressure them and allow the calls? And is Braden Smith healthy because he got hurt in the Big Ten tournament? Mm-hmm. If Purdue does not make it past the Sweet 16, let's say they don't even make it to the Elite Eight, which of those teams in kind of the upper part of that Midwest region do you think is more likely and capable of clipping Purdue before they even get to Elite Eight?
Well, I went with Gonzaga as a future about 2 weeks ago, just looking at the time that they had that fingerprint, the one that and flying under the radar. And I said, wouldn't that be funny? Where every other year you've expected Gonzaga to be there at the end and they're just not there. Then all of a sudden, now nobody's talking about them. And as of 2 weeks ago, they fell in that club, that elite club that they were top 5 and top 10 and top 35 respectively on offense and defense. They've slipped just outside the fringe right now. So they're 5th in the country in offensive efficiency, for me 36th on defense. But still, the fact that they are so close to being on the fringe and puts them in that elite club is really kind of telling. And a lot of people aren't talking about them just because Gonzaga early on wasn't winning those games against elite competition. But later on in the year, you saw them, they beat Kentucky. So the talent is there. I've kind of said that's the Gonzaga team that nobody's talking about. And if there was going to be a year that Gonzaga was probably going to make a surprise run when nobody saw it coming, it would be this year. I could definitely see Gonzaga being that team to come out of that top half of the Midwest bracket.
Trev, Gonzaga back at Cinderella roles. How about that?
Yeah, I'm not going to touch that with a 100-foot pole, but Eric, first of all, good to see you. Welcome. Thanks for coming on today. Look, you said you're a Wisconsin guy. Thoughts on everyone being picking JMU as the darling?
Oh, doesn't surprise me. In fact, I kind of, I hate to say it, and people are going to hate me for doing it, but I'm also picking JMU in that game.
Yes. All right.
I'm very objective. I want to see them do well. I'm going to be rooting hard for the Badgers on that particular day, but I look at this and I say, my thought, I'm getting flashbacks to 2022 Iowa. Remember, Iowa, I think, won 4 games, really played above themselves in the end. So, or was it last year or 2 years ago?
Yep.
It was. Yep. It might have been. I think it was 2 years ago. It was
Richmond
2 years ago.
Beat them.
Yep, Richmond, exactly. And that's kind of the thought. Very similar. Iowa won by shooting long distance. Wisconsin hitting, 16 threes in that win versus Maryland. And all of a sudden, a lot of people said, have they flipped the switch? Are they turning the clock back to November and December when they got all the way up to 6th in the country? Actually, that was in January. But then they hit hard times, and a lot of people said maybe they got the hard times out of the way. I don't know. My fear is, and I hope I'm wrong on this one, but my fear is that Wisconsin is kind of reverting back, will revert back in the tournament to the team that we saw kind of in February. Like I said, I hope I'm wrong. They're healthier now. They get Kamari McGee back. That's an additional body out there. That's great for them. But one of the things I do when I pick my brackets is I force myself to make a lot of these upset picks, and I have to pick a couple 11s and a 12 and a 13. I make myself do that every year. And just looking at the brackets and the way they unfolded, I kind of looked and said, if there's going to be a 12 that beats a 5, JMU is probably as good a bet as anybody.
Yeah, I love that. And I was at a game earlier this year, and I can't wait for your first tweet about the analytically final in the tournament. There's going to be a 16, it's probably 16-1. I was at a 50-point first half with Hofstra and Hampton, and I forgot to message you and ask you about analytically final there. I'll get with you about it offline, but thank you again for coming.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead.
No, it wasn't Josh. It was me. Get your names right. Anyways, I'll go ahead and go. First of all, welcome back to the show. Go Pack Go, as always. I want to ask, when you compare the backcourts in this region, there's a lot of good backcourts. Purdue with Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and obviously Tennessee was the Kai Ziegler and Dalton Connect. There's a lot of good backcourts in this region. In my opinion, one of the most underrated backcourts in this region is Max Amos and Tyrese Hunter sitting at the 7th seed for Texas. Max Amos has done this before, going into the tournament as one of the tournament darlings. I'm not going to pick this game. Am I crazy for thinking Texas can upset 2 seed Tennessee in the second round?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I look at Tennessee and say that's the team that a lot of people have said have been repeatedly snake bitten in the tournament, and that lingers around for people, and then usually it repeats itself. There's a reason that history repeats itself. There's a reason why these certain storylines around certain teams and certain coaches are there. Rick Barnes being one of them, Matt Painter being another. Arizona is another one that's snake bitten. So no, that's definitely one that you have to look at. The one that I worry about, I would think, for Texas is going to be the fact that they might meet Virginia, and Virginia is a major problem because you don't know which Virginia you're getting. You're getting Jekyll Virginia or Hyde Virginia. It's. I even said something earlier today on Twitter that I'm like, this is Virginia right here. It's Two-Face from Batman. You don't know which one you're going to get it. But if you get good Virginia, and there's a very good chance you do get good Virginia, then you can get, have a real serious problem on your hands if they bring their A game. But at the same time, if bad Virginia shows up, they could very well get bounced right away by Colorado State. If that goes, if that comes to fruition, then I think that works to Tennessee or to Texas's advantage, because the Colorado State and the rest of the MWC outside of San Diego State doesn't perform very well in the NCAA tournament. 0-11 in the last 4 years. If you take out San Diego State from last season, that's a conference that just has, for whatever reason, not had a lot of success. And the selection committee knows that, and that's why they basically fell a seed line or two lower across the board, with the exception of San Diego State in the bracket reveal yesterday.
DeRosa, bad Virginia is bad for the eyes. Please, dear God. Bad Virginia doesn't score 40. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I just hope Isaiah Stevens can go off and we don't have to watch that team play 2 games. But one of the more interesting things, I think, anyone who follows college basketball, especially in this month, noted, was the amount of bid stealers we had. And the entire 11 line is just filled with bid stealers. When we look at the 11 seeds this year, are there any teams that like are really catching your eye as like, oh, this team, look, they're not only are they hot in March, but they can win a game or 2 in the tournament. And there's one team I'm looking for you to say. No pressure.
Well, looking at my bracket that I'm picking here, there's a couple that the 11s that I did pick. Duquesne was one of them. And the reason I picked Duquesne was one of them. I picked them because BYU, just those away from home ratings, that's a team that has really bolstered its ratings by playing at home. I think if anything, BYU has always been kind of that team that has been a little bit overrated. They've kind of ballooned like a puffer fish early on in the season because they were winning games by 30, 35, 40 points. And that kind of really blew out their efficiency margins. So I think if there's a team that's susceptible on the 6th line, it's BYU. But the team I'm going to throw out there I think the weakest bracket, the bottom half of the South, I'm going to say NC State is going to be the team that's going to continue to roll.
That.
I do not. And boy, when you look at the bottom half of the South, that is going to be, in my mind, upset city. I'm not a big fan of Texas Tech. I think Oakland defeats Kentucky. I'm going to pick that one as an upset pick.
Oh, baby. Let's go.
I love you. I love you so much.
Let's go, baby.
Yeah. I'll say with Florida, the loss of Hanlockton, that's going to be potentially problematic with it. And then you got Marquette, who's another team that time and time again, they are who they are. They're going to have trouble rebounding on the offense end, and the ball is not falling. On top of that, the Tyler Kolek injury, which is very hush-hush. We don't know what's going on there. I could definitely see NC State running all the way to the Elite Eight on this one. They have the momentum right now. And you look at the teams that they could potentially face. I'm like, I think that if there's going to be one part of the bracket that is going to be upset city, it's going to be the bottom half of the South, in my opinion.
So I want to know quickly on the Kolek injury. Shaka, I was at the Big East tournament. So at the presser, he basically anytime they asked about Kolek once, and Joplin and Cam Jones both kind of sat over there and were just laughing because they're like, yeah, we know the exact answer they're giving. Kolek isn't going to play, but they do expect him to be back in the tournament. I believe they were saving him up solely to have him play in the tournament. That was my read on things.
Go ahead. I was going to say, and I understand that. I don't think Marquette had a ton to play for in the Big East tournament. I think they were probably solidly on that 2 line. And I kind of looked at it that way and say, well, I mean, they did quite well for themselves considering they don't have him. But, lingering injuries. I don't know, like maybe he's good to go, but all of a sudden one little thing, young guys, probably not like me where I'm washed up at 50 and all of a sudden I turn the wrong way and I'm laid up for 6 weeks. He's probably going to be okay. But there is going to be that lingering question mark where we just don't know. So I got to kind of, throw that out there on top of being Marquette and Shaka Smart, a guy who has not had a ton of success in the NCAA tournament since he was at VCU. Marquette they are who they are, a team that the shots aren't falling. They aren't getting second chances. Their rebounding is not fantastic. I think they're susceptible still.
I don't know who I can hat tip to this. I wish I had it in front of me. But apparently he's no longer in pain was the last thing I think someone had reported. He's no longer in pain. So it's just a matter of the fear of re-aggravation. And obviously you want to get by a really fast, Western Kentucky team. So that obviously is something to think about. But I just wanted to say thank you for that 11 thing. Thank you so much.
Phil?
So everybody always wants to know about the juicy upset picks, but on that 5, 6, or 7 seed line, is there a team or a matchup that you really like to hold court and not get upset?
Well, I talked about Gonzaga. I like Gonzaga on that one. That's one that I have going. And on the other side, one that's going to be a popular pick, I think, and I was dying to pick against them for the same reason I want to pick against Kentucky, and that's Alabama. And I was going to say, I've been saying for the last 2 weeks, I said, I'm going to pick I don't care who it is. I'm picking whoever's playing Alabama. And then I saw who Alabama was given, and they were basically given Alabama light. And I was kind of like the team that's going to play their same style of ball. And I'm like, that's not good for Charleston. That's a bad draw. So in that situation, this is going to be the one team out there that I'm going to actually have Alabama hold court against in the first round. So I will pick Alabama to win that game. If you go to the different brackets, I have San Diego State coming through against UAB. I have Duke coming through against Vermont. I have Duke going quite a ways. I had a future bet on them a few weeks ago as well. The loss of Foster is going to be potentially problematic. I might actually be able to, make them go all the way to the championship game, but the injury and the depth situation gives me pause there. The reason I think Duke can still get out of the region and get to the Final Four out of the South is, like I said, because of what's going on in the bottom half of the South. I think there's going to be mass mayhem there. If I think Houston is going to have their own depth issues. Traditionally, teams that have been really elite defensively but not phenomenal offensively have struggled in this tournament. I think Duke meets the qualifications of that top 10, top 35 offense, defense club that I talked about. So I look at Duke and say, I think Duke is probably going to be maybe, if you're going to get a lower seed, someone who's not going to be on the 1, 2, 3 line, who's going to make it to the Final Four. I think Duke has as good a potential as anybody in this tournament.
Eric, first of all, we appreciate you coming on. I got one last thing for you. I thought we had a great friendship here. Packer Nation, go Pack, go. All the times you've come on before, and you're going to do my cats dirty like that. Come on, but seriously.
Hey, I did my Badgers dirty, so it's
all right. I'll give you a break. Hey, we all got to be wrong sometimes, and you're wrong on this one. But last question, and then we'll let you go. We appreciate the hell out of you, by the way. 1 seeds. I said Houston, and you kind of alluded to it there. I think the winner of Nebraska, Texas A&M potentially clips Houston with either Nebraska scoring or A&M can match up physicality, and they have 2 elite guards. Houston struggles scoring at times if it's not Sheed and Cryer going nuts. When you look at all the 1 seeds, if you had to pick one who's in the most danger of getting clipped early, who would it be?
Well, I'll probably stand by and say Houston for that the same reason that I talked about before, which is I think like elite teams, when you think about elite defenses, you think of like Houston, you think of Iowa State, and you look at what happened with Houston. They did quite well for themselves last year, but they ended up getting beat by a very good offensive team in Miami. Iowa State, what happened to them last year? You can all of a sudden you get in the tournament, you tighten up. You got to be able to make shots at some point. And Iowa State was down 22-2 in that first round game against Pittsburgh last year. So I think if you look at these teams, the 2 that I really like as far as their long-term outlook, obviously UConn and Purdue. I've always had a little thing for North Carolina. They were my first futures pick back, I would say, I think in the middle of January. I think I even tweeted at one point that I said North Carolina is this year's UConn, in my opinion.
Ooh.
Now the problem is offensively, I don't know if they have it. They don't turn it on to an elite level offensively, but I still think they're Final Four good. So UNC is in my Final Four, losing to UConn. But boy, UConn I think is pretty. I hate to say, I'm not going to say knock on wood, untouchable up to the Final Four. I don't know if anybody can beat them. I know a lot of people are picking Auburn. I'm not a believer in Auburn. I still believe that UConn is a better team. But if you're looking at that team that's going to lose pretty early, I'm probably going to side against picking against Houston. I agree with you. I think whoever comes out of that first round game could be a handful for Houston. In fact, I have Texas A&M going to the Sweet 16.
I completely agree. Eric, it's been great to see you again. Can't wait till the next time. Hopefully the next time when we get to talk, Green Bay is rolling so we can have some more Packer talk. But we appreciate you as always, my friend. Guys, go drop Eric a follow. It's scrolling on the bottom there. And go check out his website. He does analytics as best as anybody in this business does at HaslamMetrics.com. You can follow him at HaslamMetrics. Just that. It's on the scrolling ticker if you're watching along on the YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all that fun stuff. Eric, my friend, thank you for the time today to jump on our big tournament special, and cannot wait to talk to you again.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Eric. Eric's awesome. Like Phil, you and Peyton's had him on quite a bit, and he's an awesome dude. We always get great insight from him too. And he dropped some nuggets too that kind of agreed with all of us at various points. He agreed with me on Houston. He agreed with you guys that Kentucky's going to get bounced early. Hell, he tickled Trevor's taint there a little bit, telling him North Carolina State's going to the Elite Eight. So
I mean, he picked Gonzaga to maybe win the national title right after you just buried.
Yeah. Look, and I did not expect him to say Elite Eight, but yeah, that was wild. Great stuff from Eric.
Yep. He's always a fun, like he's a good dude, man. But let's move on to the West here, our last region to cover. North Carolina, we talked with Eric a little bit about it. They're the 1 seed out here. Arizona is the 2. Talking about storylines out here. The Caleb Love, RJ Davis matchup, Elite Eight. I mean, obviously the committee knows what they're doing. We've said that for years. Baylor, the 3, Alabama, the 4. When I look, and Trev, you guys kind of talked about at the top of the show about this could be literally the wild, wild west, and things get a little nutty out here. Trev, when you look at this, I see potential upsets galore, but at the same time, I could see all chalk leading to the Sweet 16. I think this is the region that anything can happen.
Yeah, when John Rothstein famously renames the regions, I was really surprised he didn't just call it the Wild Wild West. He called it the region of drama. Of course, we've got a potential setup here for North Carolina and Arizona to go head-to-head in the Elite Eight. Spoiler, I don't have that. Just my real first upfront comment. There's not a chance we don't see the most ridiculous upsets out of this bracket. I know there was a ton of teams that I like and some others, but as we'll get to in a little bit, I'm sure I've got some ridiculous stuff out of this bracket when we get to the Final Four.
I think, Peyton, I think I know your answer. Phil, I haven't talked to you about it, but I know damn sure DeRosa. And DeRosa, I'll let you talk about it a little bit more. But I think we all kind of like New Mexico to make a little run here. Do we agree with that?
Absolutely.
I was trying to get Haslam.
I know where you're going to, yeah.
I was trying to get him to answer New Mexico. I think New Mexico team, I think they beat the ever-loving piss out of Clemson. You were asking Joe Girard to play 40 minutes of defense on Donovan Dent or Jamal Mashburn or Jalen House. Get fucking real. Ain't no way that's happening. Come on now. These guys are going to go ballistic. And they got matchups for PJ Hall. I think they're just the better team than Clemson. I think they win that game. I'm very confident they win that game. And then round 2, I think they can beat Baylor. Like, that's just going to be excellent guards versus excellent guards. I think Yves Massey has kind of an advantage inside, but I think they got guys for Jalen Bridges. And Yves Massey, when he controls the game, he does it defensively. He's not going to kill these guys on the glass. I cannot think of the name of the freshman again, and it is really bothering me. But Nelly Jr. Joseph and Mustafa Amsil.
JT Toppin.
What? JT Toppin. Thank you, Josh. Yeah.
We talked about it months ago. Remember when they,
100% we did. And I'll tell you right now, they slumped for a little bit. This team is back. I think they are built to win tournament games, and New Mexico is going to beat Clemson. I am very confident in that. They're winning this first round game. They're the favorites in Vegas for a reason. And I'll tell you right now, I placed a very responsible bet on New Mexico to win that game.
Phil, what's your thoughts on New Mexico? Because obviously you're right there in ACC country. You've watched Clemson quite a bit. To me, it felt like Clemson's going to Clemson, right? They got off to a hot start. People bought into them. And then as conference play rolled on, they took a nosedive. They still end up at 6 seed, which is higher than maybe most of us thought they should have been. But they've got a really tough matchup, man. Do you favor New Mexico not only to beat Clemson, to make a potential run here in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I'll leave the resident Clemson defending for Trevor, but I'm definitely on New Mexico as well here. Like DeRosa said, I don't think Clemson has any chance of guarding that backcourt. I mean, I think Jalen House goes for like 30 in this game and just absolutely lights it up. I don't like New Mexico in the second round in that Baylor matchup, but I like New Mexico pretty easily in that Clemson matchup. I'm just not a Clemson fan. You mentioned it, Josh. Clemson's gonna Clemson. They finished, what was it, 4th in a bad ACC, 5th in a bad ACC. Don't have it sitting right in front of me, but yeah, they're just not a very good team. Yeah.
I'm not defending them. I'm not defending them, but I'll just be really quick since I am the person that had them as like when we did like, I don't remember exactly what the segment was, but we did like some teams randomly, like what's their ceiling.
It was a couple months ago, right? Yeah.
Yeah, early. And then 2 months later, I watched them beat North Carolina at the Dean Dome live, and that was, of course, then I'm in an emotional bag at that point. But the best version of Clemson is led by PJ Hall when a ridiculous double machine, 20 and 10 type of deal, and they can make the Sweet 16 against Arizona. Unfortunately, New Mexico, like I've been saying this entire time. Yes. Shout out to Carl for hanging out with us. Thank you, Carl. Got to hang out with Carl in DC for the CAA championship. Carl's
shout out Carl.
Some great work at the Jim Range podcast. But my whole thing with Clemson is they have a chance to make it to the Sweet 16 against Arizona. The issue is, like, I think they do match up well against Baylor, because I don't think Baylor's front court consistently will be able to guard Clemson's front court. But at the end of the day, I'm not defending Clemson, like Phil said, as you'll see in just a minute when we get to Final Four picks.
Peyton, I think there's a couple other that's brewing in this region here, and I know St. Mary's had a good year, and I know people, shout out Chris the Dinga, loves Aiden McConnell for St. Mary's, but I like Bryce Drew's team. I mean, they won 29 games this year, and don't tell me that they couldn't play. And if you slid them into the Mountain West, I think they could have competed in a very good Mountain West this year. They shoot the three slightly under average. It's like 34.4%, close enough to that 35% average. But they're top 65 in both offense and defense, and they've got two players that are elite at that level, especially to play a team like St. Mary's, kind of similar stature there. Jovan Blackshear at the point guard spot and Tyon Grant Foster, I think, can give St. Mary's problems. St. Mary's defense, they want to slow it down and grind it out. Aiden McConnell is going to shoot 25 times probably in this game, but if he's not hitting, and especially if he has a cold night, I can see Grand Canyon as a 12 seed putting an absolute whooping on St. Mary's. I kind of like Grand Canyon to move on to play, whether it's Alabama or Charleston, whoever. I think Grand Canyon can get a win in this tournament.
I don't. I think St. Mary's handles them pretty well. I do like Tyon Grant Foster. That is a name in this region, or this whole bracket in general, that could just go off and really be a much darling, but I don't see it happening. St. Mary's is just too tough defensively, and they just dominate the glass, both sides of the ball. Offensive rebounding percentage, they're third, and defensively, they're second. So nobody gets rebounds on them at all. They do a great job, and obviously they got Aiden Mahaney. They've got a really good team, a really well-balanced team. Scoring is definitely an issue, but they can hit a couple of shots. They're still shooting about 35% from three, which is a little bit better than what Grand Canyon's doing on the year. I really like this St. Mary's team. I think they've done a great job this season. They've won a lot of ball games, and I think they got the grit and the defensive style to really give Grand Canyon issues. I think St. Mary's wins this one.
Is there any upsets besides the two we've mentioned? New Mexico over Clemson. I think Grand Canyon over St. Mary's. Anything else? Trevor, Phil, DeRosa, do you guys think Charleston can beat Alabama? I mean, Alabama doesn't guard a whole lot, but they can score in the hundreds. How about Dayton, Nevada is a sneaky good 7-10 game. I mean, the winner of that may be able to handle Arizona. When you guys look at this bracket, again, we called it the Wild Wild West. Talk to me about potential pitfalls for some of the higher ranked teams that you see moving forward.
Alabama can't guard a wet paper bag. I'm just going to put that up front. Okay. Charleston, if there is a team, I know Eric had a great point about that, but if there is a team that can defend Alabama or that can beat Alabama, it's Charleston. There's a team that can keep up with them. I've seen them 4 times this year. They're an incredible offense. They're super, super deep. They go way into the bench. They won the NCAA tournament without really having to even do that. So they've got fresh legs ready to play in the tournament. They're my pretty pick in this. And then I'll just throw this out here now since we're almost done. And then the fact that it hasn't been brought up yet. A 15 seed has beaten a 2 seed 3 years in a row. And I look at the grand scheme of, I know Western Kentucky has an incredible offense, and we talked about that earlier. But I think Long Beach State, just because of how ridiculous it is probably the team that could do it.
Tell the people that don't know about the situation with the coach right now.
I don't know the intricacies, so I mean, if DeRosa wants to do it, he can. At the end of the day, their coach was fired on Monday, or parted ways on Monday. He asked, can I just at least finish it out with this group of guys? According to people around the team, they really like the coach. I just think after so many years there, it just isn't working it out, and lo and behold, they go on and they win the freaking whatever conference, the big something. I know it's out west, Big West, right? Or something like that. They win the conference, and at the end of the day, they're in the March Madness tournament, and I know it's not Princeton. I know it's Arizona again. I get it. I'm just saying out of the 4, Western Kentucky's probably going to be the pretty pick of those. I'm just saying, why can't the ridiculousness of Long Beach State? But to answer your original question, for me, it's Charleston. I think if they can get past Alabama, I have them right now. I actually have them in the Sweet 16. I just changed my St. Mary's Grand Canyon pick at the last minute. I don't think Grand Canyon's deep enough, but I do have Charleston, I think, making the Sweet 16. I think this is the year that Pat Kelsey gets over the top, and then he gets a really, really big coaching gig here in the next 1 to 2 years based off of this tournament.
And for those who don't know, real quick, before Phil and DeRosa chime in, Dan Monson's his name, the fired, but yet still head coach at Long Beach State. The name sounds familiar to those older fans is because he is the architect of the Gonzaga dynasty. He started this in the late 90s, brought Gonzaga to national prominence, and then handed it off, and Mark Few's ran with it ever since, basically. But Dan Monson will always go down in history as starting the Gonzaga push to national prominence. DeRosa, Phil, kind of when you look at this bracket, potential pitfalls for some of the higher seeds.
Yeah, I'll take this immediately. First of all, I think North Carolina, this region has teams that are so good on good days, and then on bad days, they are just fucking terrible. And that is for all top 4 seeds. They all are the highest peaks, lowest valleys. So these guys can really lose to anyone. But just going through, I mean, look, I think Howard beats Wagner. I've actually placed a bet on that. I really like this Howard team. Go Howard. They're not beating UNC. How often do we see a 12 seed that is significantly more athletic than a 5 seed? Because Grand Canyon is significantly more athletic than St. Mary's. That's just really rare, but it is true. Charleston's not beating Alabama. Colgate is not beating Baylor. I have Baylor winning that game comfortably, maybe by 20 plus. And Arizona, I honestly think this region kind of opens up for Arizona. I think Arizona should handle Long Beach. I think they should handle either Dayton or Nevada. And I think Arizona matched up fairly well with Baylor. I think, again, that game could be streaky. But if I want top seed that could lose early, yeah, fuck it. Grand Canyon could beat Alabama. They have the athletes to guard them. Keep that game slow-paced. I don't know. They could get lucky and do it. I have no confidence in this region. Also, Mississippi State, if Tolu and Josh Hubbard goes off, I don't know. They could beat UNC.
I think they can beat North Carolina. That's my pick. I've got Mississippi State to the Sweet 16. I think they match up physicality, and Josh Hubbard is a star that everybody's going to find out real quick if you hadn't watched SEC play. Phil, kind of some pitfalls real quick from some of the top teams in top teams in the West.
Yeah, I mean, we already mentioned New Mexico over Clemson, but honestly, I don't really like, I don't like Grand Canyon over St. Mary's, and I don't like Charleston over Alabama. If you flip-flopped those matchups, I'd probably be a lot more apt to pick Grand Canyon over Alabama and Charleston over St. Mary's. But as Haslam mentioned, I just think, Charleston is kind of Alabama light. If there was a team that was going to beat Alabama, it would be a team that could kind of slow them down a little bit. I don't think Charleston's going to do that. I think Alabama's going to be able to score as much as they want. We mentioned Alabama can't guard, but Charleston can't guard either. They're 167th in the country in defense. So that one's going to be 1,000,000 points, but I think Alabama comes out ahead. Ultimately, I think this bracket comes out pretty chalk.
Can I give a counterpoint to that? Alabama, I mean, Tennessee, obviously some of those teams, but Alabama, they lost like 3 of their last 5 in the regular season. And they lost to Florida, who doesn't play a lick of defense either, scored 102, and then in the conference tournament, they scored another 100 points on them. Kentucky doesn't guard the greatest, put 117 on them. So Charleston doesn't have to play great defense. They just got to go blow for blow with them, scoring, and find, again, like 3-4 minute segments to make sure Alabama misses shots or force turnovers. So you can be a high-scoring team and beat Alabama. You just got to match them point for point and then find a spurt throughout the game to slow them down. That's
now, in
just
fairness,
the point I want.
Neither Charleston doesn't have the talent of either of those teams.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's true. Alabama, though, like Kentucky has problems with teams that are physical. Alabama just has problems guarding, period. They have problems guarding. It's optional as hell. I will say this. I could see a world, if everything gets wild and crazy, that the 1 and 2 seeds in North Carolina and Arizona do not make it out of the first weekend. Whether North Carolina loses to Mississippi State, as I've predicted, I can see Michigan State getting by and then beating North Carolina, and I can see Arizona losing to Dayton or Nevada, and we go into the Sweet 16 with the 1 and 2 seeds completely gone, and it opens up for a team like Baylor or even in Alabama we've talked about, because then their biggest oppositions would be kind of gone. Maybe even a Michigan State making a run. Who knows? This is why it's the wild, wild west region. Before we get into our final 4 picks, I want to do 2 more things. It would be real quick. Let's look around all the brackets, all 4 regions. Some of the top storylines to keep an eye out on in this NCAA tournament throughout. I'll throw the first one out just to give an idea, and we'll go back to the West. If it plays chalk, if we get North Carolina, Arizona, the storyline is you've got Caleb Love against his former team, against his former backcourt mate. winner goes to the Final Four. I think that's a huge storyline that could play out right in front of our eyes. We'll go around the table. Give me one or two storylines quickly that you want the nation to be watching for potentially in this NCAA tournament. Peyton.
Nice. I go next. Therefore, nobody steals my one I used last night because I'm going to use the exact same one. If you go into what's the region is? South, the Midwest region, excuse me, there's a chance we can see Purdue taking on Tennessee in the Elite Eight. The best player in the country in Dalton, Connecticut, against the most dominant player in the country, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. As far outside of like John Calipari, the two coaches that has the most to prove in March is Rick Barnes and Matt Painter, and they have a chance to go head-to-head for a second time this year for a chance to go to the Final Four. That's the most intriguing storyline to me, and we'll get to that matchup maybe in a little bit, but that's a very intriguing matchup. Dominant versus the best, and I really like that one. That's my number one.
Trevor?
I was gonna go with the obvious Caleb Love, RJ Davis, Carolina, whatever, but I'll give you a different one because I think everyone's excited for that one. I don't remember who brought it up last night, but Hunted versus the Hunter. I really like the idea of just what that. Obviously, the East. We talked about it at the top. Michael, I'm sorry if that was you. I apologize.
You're good. You're good.
But like, I really look. I'll give you. Look, I know that's probably what you were going to say. The Iowa State Drake in Omaha we brought up earlier. That round of 32 being like in Omaha. That's going to be the best crowd. That storyline, just that matchup if it happens. I'll give you that one since the UConn Hunter Hunted. I apologize to DeRosa for.
DeRosa, do you got another one besides the one that got stole from you?
No, I'm going to use that one because Trev didn't fully explain it. So thank you, Trev, for saving it for me.
There you go. Yeah.
Not only will UConn, look, you go from the Hunter to a 4 seed with a chip on your shoulder that was great in the beginning of the season, took a little bit of a slump, then was just great to end the year and was just dominant and didn't lose a game. Now everybody looks at their schedule and says, that is the team we have to be better than. That is UConn. I think that changes everything. And not only that, you're playing a team you could have played last year in the Final Four in FAU. You're playing a team that you could have played in the national title game if they both get there in San Diego State. Or you're playing an Auburn team that is incredibly athletic in all 5 positions. That creates a ton of problems for them. Both teams will look at that matchup and say, either we need to get revenge or that is the team we are supposed to be better than all season long. Then you go down to the bottom of the bracket. Illinois is another team that plays with a chip on their shoulder. The Mighty Mormons would stand no chance in that game. Or Iowa State. Iowa State can defend UConn too. There are not many teams that can defend the complex actions UConn runs. Iowa State can and can on short notice. I think that matters a lot. Just UConn going from being the Hunter, the team that look, you were just looking and UConn's like, yeah, we're just better than these guys. And the other team wasn't looking at it, UConn, like they were the best team in the country as they should have. Now you are not sneaking up on no one. You ain't sneaking up on no one. You got to be better than everyone else on every given day. Good luck.
I really want to see Alex Karaban try to guard Milan Momcilovic. How do you say his last name?
Momcilovic.
Pulling him away from the rim, making him guard actions. That would be a lot of fun. Phil, storyline or two that the nation needs to pay attention to potentially if we get those matchups in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I haven't really heard anybody around the country mention this, but potentially in the second round, Oregon against Creighton, Dana Altman
there you go.
Going against his former school.
Good shout.
Yeah, just a little something. But yeah, other than that, don't really have a ton of stuff to look out for.
Yeah, and I'll throw one more, and I mentioned it on the House College Hoops bracket show last night. If we could get Kentucky, Duke with all that history in the Elite Eight, winner goes Final Four. I mean, I listed the history, the Leitner shot, my number one moment in March Madness moments on the top 10 that we put on the YouTube. Scott Padgett at Kentucky raced a 17-point deficit in 98, goes on to win. Potential matchups we should have had in 2010, 2015. If we somehow get Duke and Kentucky in the Elite Eight, that'll be the biggest draw, ratings draw in the NCAA tournament this season. I would bank on that. I think now that we got storylines out of the way, 30 seconds, if that at all, real quick. I wanted to do this because we've all blown UConn, and we're going to get to Final Four picks, and I guarantee you UConn's going to be on all of ours, or at least most of us. Let's make a case collectively why UConn will not go back-to-back and will not make a Final Four. I know it's difficult, but let's throw some ideas out there, reasons why against UConn as opposed to they're that damn good they're going to win it. Anybody?
Can I just defer? I think DeRosa already did it. I think the Iowa State thing on the short turnaround, I think DeRosa accidentally just did that whole case 30 seconds ago. So
I like
I'm
that,
going to
yeah.
defer. I'm going to defer to what he literally just said about the quick turnaround. If Iowa State's defense is that intricate and that good, I think they'll prepare well for UConn. I think they're already thinking ahead a little bit to that, which I know that can be dangerous. But like if they get there, that's something that I think they'll be able to do. So I defer to see case in point a minute and a half ago. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah,
I think that's fair, actually.
I'll add on
Way
to
to blow
that.
my spot, DeRosa. Way to blow my spot I had on the format.
Listen,
No,
I'll add on to that. Not just talking about just team wise, because I do think we mentioned it earlier. They got a very tough region, but let's just look at the facts. No team since Florida, when they went back to back, has made it past the Sweet 16 since then. I think that's very important to keep in mind. I know UConn's really freaking talented. They got a lot of depth. They can win a multitude of ways. I do like DeRosa's point, and just the facts just back it up. No team since Florida has gotten past the Sweet 16 since they went back to back. That's all I'm going to say.
Phil, if UConn has a bad shooting night, are they good enough to, let's say they find themselves in a deficit to like Auburn in the Sweet 16 and Auburn jumps them from the start and they find themselves down, let's say 31-13, 18 points immediately. Can they rely on their shooting to get back in that game? That's something I worry about in these tournament games.
I mean, I think they've kind of proven they can the past couple of weeks. They've, fallen behind a little bit, had some close games and ended up blowing teams out by 15, 20 points. So I'm not so sure that's the issue. I think my case against UConn would just be somebody having a huge performance against them. TJ Shannon in the Elite Eight dropping 40 points. Somebody on Auburn going off. Could be, who could be Holloway, could be whoever, but I think it's going to take a kind of legendary performance to knock UConn off. I know, Peyton mentioned the history doesn't really favor them, but this UConn team is just stacked. I think they're probably going to do it, but yeah, the case against them is just somebody having a huge game.
And don't forget, we've talked about this for years and years, and it stands true. If they find themselves within a 1 or 2 possession game late in that game, the whole crowd outside of UConn fans in that building will turn on them, whether it be Northwestern in the second round or whoever. That whole crowd will turn on them and they will have to feel the heat. And that's even in their experience, that is a hard answer to call the bell there or to answer the bell. Trev, I was going to say, Eric kind of made the case for you because I was going to do our teams just real quick, 30 seconds, have everybody else pitch why our teams can make a run. I think Eric kind of did North Carolina State for you, why they could make a run there with getting hot in certain matchups and stuff. If North Carolina State was to make a run in this NCAA tournament, Phil, Michael, and Peyton, real quick, how would they do it? Like, what would be their path to do that?
NC State?
Yeah. We're being nice and positive to our teams here.
Okay.
Well, Michael's team's already in the tournament, so that's
they're not in the tournament.
Well, that's unfortunate for him.
Yeah, it's tough.
I'm just kidding.
They have to shoot really well from 3 and learn to play defense.
That's pretty fair. They honestly they just have to survive. They have to survive against Texas Tech. I think that's actually the hardest matchup of the 2 or 3 they would get to make that Eric Elite Eight type of run like you talked about. I think they can physically match up against Kentucky. I think the guards, obviously, if they can get some rest, I think it'll be interesting. And then again, Marquette, Florida, whoever, that's a crapshoot down there.
So as NC State goes, they got good guards, so they can definitely do it. And also nobody in this side of the region is guarding DJ Burns. He is a refrigerator on wheels. I mean, that man, he's big and he can move. He's agile and nobody is touching him in that region. Like, he had a hell of a performance in the ACC tournament. I think he can potentially do it again. If that's the case, then I definitely can see NC State potentially making a run to the Sweet 16. Hell, maybe even the Elite Eight.
Phil, if North Carolina State gets by the first weekend, if they beat Texas Tech and presumably Kentucky, and then let's say play Marquette, I do think DJ Burns could bully ball his way against Oso Ighodaro. Then that puts them in Elite Eight and anything could happen. And if it comes true that Houston's not there, they might be favored against, they've already beat Duke in the last week. They could beat a Texas A&M or whoever. I think the path's potentially there for North Carolina State. What say you if things went right for them?
I mean, if things went right for them, the guards continue to play the way they've just played for 5 straight games. And then, they probably run into a couple of poor shooting performances. They're not the most elite defensive team. So may take, some luck having an opponent shoot poorly. But yeah.
If Illinois, real quick, we'll do these quick. Illinois, 3 seed. Love this team. They're so fun to watch. when they're bad, they don't defend, they miss shots, take some bad shots, all that. But they're in that region with UConn. Iowa State be tough defensively. But I like Illinois' potential path to make a run here, fellas. I think if they were to make, like, say, a Final Four, they slaughter Morehead State, don't even make it close, and Terrence Shannon and Marcus Domas carry them, and then you get good Coleman Hawkins the majority of this tournament. I think they could beat Iowa State just by outgunning them. And then you get to potentially UConn, and then make it a track meet, and then have your stars go off. I think there's a path there for Illinois to make a Final Four. What do you guys say real quick?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a path, but it's going to take Dane Dinja, defending a little bit and actually being able to be on the floor, giving us some sort of post presence. Coleman Hawkins not playing like a complete fucking idiot for 20 minutes out of the game, which he generally does. TJ Shannon shooting the ball pretty well. I mean, that it sounds like a lot of things have to go our way, but that's me, the Illinois skeptical fan here. Would love to see if Ty Rodgers can step up and distribute and lead the offense a little bit
Quincy
more.
Guerrier too.
Yeah, take some of that pressure off of Shannon and Damask to create literally everything on offense. That would definitely be helpful. But honestly, I think the biggest key is to just get some sort of post presence out of Dinja defensively. I mean, I know he doesn't play a ton, but if they could get him on the court for 20 minutes a game, he could be a difference maker.
Any of you other ones? Illinois' path?
I was an Illinois defender most of this year, and then they decided to stop playing defense. And I honestly still believe that this team has the ceiling to be a Final Four team. I just think they are contributing to the East being the best bracket, or region. But my God, BYU's in the round of 32. I mean, like DeRosa laid out the case earlier. That's not easy, right? I think that's like we just said, they're 6 because of their Sunday thing, right? And then potentially UConn in the Elite 8 or Sweet 16, or Elite 8. Yeah. Just Iowa State in the Sweet 16. Like, the path's going to be really, really difficult. The problem for me is I think they can keep up with anybody. And I've said that most of the year. And honestly, we know what Shannon can do. Damascus is going to have to be incredible. I look at can Coleman Hawkins be so consistent for so many rounds in a row? And I think Phil's already shaking his head. No,
he probably can't.
Limit his mistakes. Limit his mistakes. And honestly, I think he can be the big reason. If he does that, I think they can figure it out. I think that this team has a chance to do slay the UConn thing.
Trev, if he can play that way for 6 games, I will do unspeakable things that we can't.
DeRosa, though, seriously, if let's say this gets nuts and Illinois gets by that first round game against Morehead State and the bracket opens up, they're in the bottom part. Let's say BYU does win, but let's say Drake beats Washington State and then Iowa State, and then maybe Drake even beats Iowa State. Illinois has just got to beat BYU, and then they'll probably crush Drake to get to Elite 8, and who knows what the hell happens. I think there's a path for Illinois to make a Final Four.
Absolutely. This region really could open up for them, especially if Auburn FAU or Northwestern are not, but like if we want to live in fantasy land, sure, they could beat UConn, and then this region could really open up for Illinois especially, but Illinois just has the athletes and has the talent. Like, in any game Illinois is going to play, is anyone better than TJ Shannon?
Not right now, probably not. And Luke Goody, I think, is a difference maker only because he gives them toughness. Rebounding, he's a good screener. He does all the little things that every good team needs to do. I think Luke Goody could be that kind of quasi-glue guy that could really help them. Real quick, Kansas, we know they're hurt. But let's say if they can make a run to the Final Four, they're in a bracket that is very possible to do so. Let's say Hunter Dickinson's back to at least like 90%. Same with Kevin McCullough. 90% of them is still better than 100% of a lot of people. I think there's a path there for Kansas to make a Final Four if they are healthy, and then the guys like Johnny Furphy show up. Peyton, talk us through, if Kansas could make a run, how is it done?
Well, you mentioned it. It's a very favorable bracket. If Dickinson and Kevin McCullough is 95% or even just remotely close to being 100% healthy, then we look at this starting 5 and we think it's probably the best starting 5 in the country. Definitely top 3. You got a lot of good players. Johnny Furphy has came back down to earth a little bit after having a really good 2-week or about a month spurt when he was just lighting the nets on fire, shooting like over 45% from 3. He's shown he can do it. He's still capable of doing that in March. And listen, you got the best coach in the country on your sideline and Bill Self. You give those guys back healthy or close as you can get to healthy, we can still potentially make a run. And I would not count out, I don't think it's very likely, but I would not count out Kansas to potentially make it to the Elite 8.
And Trev and fellas, Hunter Dickinson does pretty well historically matching up against Zach Edey. Like, you got to keep that in mind. When he was at Michigan, he gave him some 20 and 15 nights. So he does pretty well, and he's very familiar with Zach Edey. Talk us through real quick. Any of you pipe up, I don't care. Kansas, they make a run to the Final Four. How's it done? How's it shake out?
I think Peyton made the case perfectly.
Yep, I think he did too. Kevin McCullough has to just be a just ridiculous play. I'm talking like Jimmer Fredette, like I'm not doing justice by naming that kind of guy. Kemba Walker, like he just has to be that guy for 5 rounds straight.
And then Kentucky. I'm not going to do it. Like, I'll let you guys do it. I know we have fun and there's possibilities with their defense and all the up and down. But if Kentucky makes a run and gets back to a Final Four in that region, how is it done? You guys tell me. What's the path for the Cavs?
Like, if any team can shoot threes 60% 3 games in a row, it's Kentucky, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. You got the best guards in the country, the most electrifying guards in the country, the best offense in the country. Come on now. I mean, I get the inexperience, but like they still probably have the most talent of anybody in this whole tournament. They can absolutely do it.
I mean, Peyton just said it. If they play their best basketball for 6 games, they probably win. They have more talent than anybody else on the floor. So
I like it.
Choose to go to his own defense at any point if they need to. I mean, I know you said that was such a big thing hold up for them in late January. So
Mm-hmm.
And
they've been doing it for a couple possessions. Yeah, they've been doing it a couple possessions. They're just not completely sold. We'll see. We're going to get to Final Four picks. I know, Trev, you had some trivia before we get there and start wrapping this thing up.
Take 30 seconds. Don't even look at the bracket if it's on your screen or near you. There is one Power 6 team in this bracket that has not won a game in program history. Who is it? You're back around the horn. Has never won a tournament game. Power 6 team that has never won a tournament game without looking at the bracket. We talked about all these teams.
No, South Carolina went to a Final Four.
South Carolina, Colorado.
Yeah, shit, you're right.
Yep. Okay,
they went to a Final Four magically.
I've seen the answer to this the other day, Trev, but I can't remember who it is.
Okay. Throwing out there.
Dude, without looking, I'm having a hard time right now. Northwestern's won a game. They won one that first trip back.
Their first time was in 2017, for what it's worth.
Nebraska.
It's Nebraska. Nebraska ball. Yeah. Nebraska ball has never won a power. They've never won a tournament game, and obviously Tominaga, we know what he can be and what he can do. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I didn't find a lot of fascinating things going through some of the history of this stuff. I think the 10 out of 11 first 4 thing I mentioned earlier about the Colorado's case was interesting, but for a team like a Northwestern a few years ago to never Howard. What about Howard?
They're gonna beat UNC.
Bank on it. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I just thought the Nebraska thing was interesting, being a Power 6 program that obviously historically is one of the better in football in the last 50 to 60 years, obviously for the history of football there. But I just thought it was interesting. I figured it would be a difficult thing. Phil said he saw it, so darn rats.
I like that. Peyton, it is time. We've come to the end of this tournament preview. We can't leave you guys without our exclusive Final Four picks, and I promise you, all 5 of us struggled, probably, I would imagine at least, to come up with 4 teams because, again, every time we get sold each year with the tournament, we're like, this is how it's going to be. These teams, it's like last year where you have Florida Atlantic and you have Miami coming out of nowhere as a 5 and you have San Diego State and then the powerhouse UConn. So do not take this for gold because card subject to change, as pro wrestling says on their lineup sheets. This will tell you one thing, and it'll end up being a bunch of 14 seeds or some crazy shit like that happening. But let's get to the Final Four picks. Peyton, let's start with yours. Put it up on the screen for those watching live.
So this changed 24 hours ago. I had the whole right side of the bracket. Actually, no, I basically changed 3 of my 4 Final Four teams. I changed a lot because this whole left side of the bracket is going to get wild, in my opinion. I think Auburn, and blame Michael DeRosa if this doesn't happen, because I told him I was on the edge of picking Auburn beating UConn in the Elite 8. And I texted, I DM'd him on Twitter. I'm like, make a case for Auburn for me. And he did a pretty good job of doing that. So if he's wrong, fuck you, DeRosa. You cost me some picks, man. And also keep this in mind. Auburn, the last time they won the SEC championship, they went on to the Final Four. They've only done it twice in program history, at least to my knowledge.
Once,
they went to the Final Four.
time.
Twice now. They won the SEC championship.
Oh, you mean? Oh, sorry. I meant you going to the Final Four. Sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
No. But anyways, the last time they won the SEC championship, they did it in 2019, and they went on to the Final Four. I really like this roster. They got a lot of depth, a lot of talent, good guard play. I think they get to the Final Four. They beat UConn in Elite Eight. St. Mary's backed behind great defense, and they got a really good player in Mahaney. I really like the St. Mary's squad.
I'm calling McConnell the whole time. It's Aiden Mahaney. Duh.
Yeah, I didn't know where he was going with that, but I'll let you cook with it. Aiden Mahaney, they've got a really good player, and they're just tough, and it's just really hard to beat them. St. Mary's goes to the Final Four. They win the West region. Houston, I think it's a given. Even though they've got injury woes, I still like Houston, and their grit and their toughness is just too much for teams to handle in that region. And Purdue, I originally had Tennessee in this region, but I did not want to go with two SEC schools in the Final Four, so I switched them to Florida. Florida beats Tennessee like they did early in the season. Tennessee, I don't think anybody in this region is going to have an answer for Zach Edey, and the biggest difference maker from last year to this year is their guards are better and they're shooting 40% from three. That's going to matter. Purdue goes to the national championship game. They play Auburn, and cutting the nets down. You can't beat passion and you can't beat confidence. That's two things that Auburn has right now. War Eagle cuts down the nets, wins the national championship.
Cue up Charles Barkley.
I want to point out for a second that in our DM, he said, sell me. I said, I like their draw. They're long, athletic, can really go, high ceiling. They should smoke Yale and San Diego State to, I believe it was Trev's credit. He made the point that San Diego State can absolutely beat Auburn. The immediate message I sent following that was, that said, they also have a low-ass floor and could drop a turd at any moment. I don't know how convincing I was, but he picked him to win the Natty, so I guess.
They're also the deepest.
A lot of people
team
are on Yale.
They're also the deepest team in this tournament because Bruce Pearl all year has played 11 dudes significant minutes, so foul trouble won't affect them as much. They've got two legitimate bigs that could, in that theoretical matchup, Sweet 16 against Donovan Clingan, could rotate between Janai Broom and Dylan Cardwell that could give him some problems. I just don't like trusting Katie Johnson with my future to win a national title, but hey, I like the boldness, Peyton. I love the boldness. Let's go down. Peyton,
shut up, Johnny.
So, Johnny.
I will say really quick, Peyton, in his defense, I'm the only person on this panel that saw Auburn in person this year that I know of, and they lost to Appalachian State, who ended up being one of the best teams in the country at the mid-major level. And if they can get ahead and not let the other team control the game, if they can keep control completely of the game, they can beat anybody in that side of the bracket. Like, that's going to be the biggest thing. App State took control of the game with about 12 minutes left. Again, on the home floor, I completely respect Bruce Pearl for scheduling that game and actually allowing that to be a thing in December. But I don't think it's far-fetched. I was shocked by
top
the
10
fact
offense
that
and
that's
top
where
10 defense and
all the historical data back him up. Like, to be clear, everything.
And the last point too, they want to play a controlled game and rely on their defense, play in the half court. But they love running opportunity-wise, too, and they've got an electric guard in Aiden Holloway. Denver Jones has changed that team with three-point shooting. Jalen Williams is really good. Hey, I don't hate it. It's unorthodox, but I don't hate it. Auburn, national champions, according to Peyton. Let's just go down the list here. Trevor, your Final Four as Peyton puts the graphic up.
All right, so if you listened to House College Hoops last night, you are going to hear an echo. So I'll be very, very sweet and short about how I pick this or predict this. But at the top there in the East, I have UConn. I know we laid out a ridiculously awesome case, which actually I don't think it ended up being that great. But I think UConn is the best team in the East. I think that's who does it up there in the top. Houston, I've been on Houston all year. Why would I back down now, right? I think that bracket will open up for them better than people think, despite a potential Elite Eight matchup, apparently, according to Eric Haslam, with the 1883 NC State team, apparently. So if they can avoid that, I think they'll be fine. But no, I think Houston's an incredible team. I know the injuries, I know the depth problems, I know there's a lot of things there that are just working against them, but at the end of the day, like, they're good for a reason. They went from the American to the Big 12 and won the freaking regular season. Like, I don't think that's been spoken about enough, and I think this is the year they get into the Final Four and they as you can see on the screen, unfortunately don't make the championship game, but I do think they're an incredible team, and a Final Four will still feel like a huge accomplishment for them. In the bottom, I went with Tennessee. Look, that's the one I actually think I struggle with the most, despite what you see in the bottom left, as I saved for last. At the end of the day, this Tennessee team is finally having the thing that they've never had to get over the hump and make the Final Four with Rick Barnes, and that's having a player like Dalton Knecht, who I think can just be a tournament level like guy all-timer we're going to never forget in the March Madness tournament, and I think that's how they get there. And then lastly, New Mexico. Look, I think Michael just laid out the perfect case earlier, and I was very, very quiet for a reason, because if people didn't watch last night and they're watching this, I have New Mexico, because at the end of the day, the West, any freaking team within reason can make this, and they're ridiculously underseeded. This is the last time I'm going to say it, maybe until Thursday, that the Mountain West got underseeded. And the fact that this team was a team that wasn't going to be in the March Madness tournament if they didn't win the Mountain West is complete and utter BS. And so, you know what? I think this team is really good. I've watched them all year, stayed up late every single night when they're playing to see them beat everybody in the Mountain West and go through the Mountain West like they did. They're an incredible team, deep guard rotation. I think the front court's incredible. I think the coach is incredible. I think they make the Final Four and unfortunately run into the buzzsaw that is the UConn Huskies. And then UConn plays Tennessee in the national championship game. And as much as I'd love to see Dalton Knecht win a national championship and just have the Tennessee Volunteers finally get over the hump officially, UConn's going to go back-to-back. This is the best chance we've gotten since 2007. I know it's hard. I know Peyton made the point about the Sweet 16 being, I think, the farthest the team's ever gotten after they won a national championship game. This is a team that completely reloaded, and I think Dan Hurley officially gets put on the map and is starting to get into one of the, those conversations with coaches that we don't really get into until you've won multiple.
I like it, man. You got UConn going back-to-back and surpassing Indiana in all-time national championship list. Very interesting.
UConn officially a blue blood, but last year already confirmed that.
Well, of course, yes. But this would definitely, I think, even make the Final Four again this year. They are completely back into that blue blood conversation. DeRosa, let's see your beautiful Final Four and explanations here.
Yes, sir. So, off the top, Auburn, I agreed with Peyton on this case. Just plain and simple. Well, one note I'm going to make here, because Peyton already made the case for Auburn, is I think if you're in a bracket pool with a ton of people and you want to win it, I don't think you can pick UConn to win the national title. I think you're going to have to pick someone to lose, and then that's how you gain the advantage over everyone else to get yourself to the top of that pool. You find the team that is going to beat UConn, or you find the national champion instead of UConn, because if everyone picks UConn, it means you're going to have a perfect bracket everywhere else, versus if you pick someone else that ends up beating UConn, or that wins the national title over UConn, you have such an advantage over the pool that you can make a couple mistakes early on. I think that's kind of the strategy, at least to me, if you want to win a massive pool. So I'm going to go with Auburn there. Houston's just really good, and I really like the road. I think it opens up for them. Tennessee, same thing. I think the road kind of opens up for them. I think the bottom of that bracket's fairly weak. I think they match up really well with Creighton, and I think they can find matchups to get Zach Edey and Purdue. They're just guards. I think are going to cause problems. And then you have two really solid wings. I think they cause problems for Purdue. And Arizona's a team that I will also have winning my national title. When that team is on, they are really on. I think when Arizona is playing their best ball, I do not think there's a team better than them in the country. And the con is I'm going to have to ask them to do it 6 times. Is that going to happen? Probably not. But I don't see many other people picking Arizona. I don't think anyone here would have picked Arizona, so I'm going to take Arizona. Look, when Caleb Love is balling, when Colin Boswell is setting teammates up, when this team is hitting shots, when Kashad Johnson getting back to a Final Four, you think they're going to deny that guy? Actually, sleeper narrative, Kashad Johnson playing UConn in the Final Four. That's another good one. Yeah, Arizona. Bags, money.
First time since 1997, by the way, that a team west of Kansas City would have won a national championship. And the last time it was done was Arizona in 1997. So I like that. West Coast basketball getting restored back to the top, and future Big 12 opponents in the national title game, by the way, Arizona, Houston.
I forgot about that.
Bill, your Final Four, please.
Well, DeRosa just kind of teed me up, because I also picked Arizona to win the national title. But earlier I sort of mentioned it and alluded to it when we were talking about the Creighton and Tennessee matchup. I actually think that Tennessee probably has all the advantages in that matchup. But I also think that in March, you have to account for some randomness. And I think Creighton can shoot the ball well enough, can score well enough that they end up knocking off Tennessee. going to the Final Four. Kentucky, as we alluded to, is probably the most talented team in the country. I think, they managed to put it together for a few games, not quite all the way. And Arizona knocks them off in the title game. Arizona has everything you could want, like DeRosa mentioned. They have size, they shoot the ball well, shoot well from three. As long as Caleb Love doesn't completely shit the bed, fumble a ball out of bounds on a fast break dunk with 30 seconds to go, they should be good.
So you have the 1997 national championship game, and you have Arizona winning another one over Kentucky. Now let's finish this out with my Final Four, Peyton. I also have Arizona, Kentucky, but in the Final Four, I just think UConn's too much. I think no matter what Auburn can do with them and keep it close, I don't trust Auburn's guards for 40 minutes against UConn's experience. So I have UConn coming out of the East. Over in the South, I have Kentucky. Now, originally, I wanted to pick I wanted to pick Marquette. But when I got to thinking about it and kind of got goaded into it, Marquette does what Kentucky does, but Kentucky does it better as far as scoring the ball, playing wide open. If Tyler Kolek's healthy, it's a different story potentially, but I'm trusting the Cats to get there. Out of the Midwest, I've said it last night, I'll say it again. Purdue, Tennessee, and Elite Eight, Dalton Knecht has maybe the best game of his entire life against Purdue's guards. They have nobody that can really match up with him. They'll let Zach Edey get his 30 and 19. But Purdue's guards have an off night. Tennessee gets to the Final Four for the first time in school history. And then I went back and forth on the West region. Last night I said Baylor. I thought about North Carolina. I thought about something crazy like even a Michigan State maybe or whoever. Then this morning, Peyton asked me for the official for this graphic. By the way, Peyton, shout out for the graphics. These are awesome. And I said, you know what? The Final Four is in Phoenix. Caleb Love's been really good in March going back to his North Carolina days. And I feel like they have enough to play in front of a home crowd. That sets up a Final Four game between UConn and Arizona. Arizona's size and guard play can match up well with UConn. I like Arizona in the title game. Kentucky, Tennessee in the rubber match. We didn't get an SEC final. We'll get it in the Final Four. Cats do what they did in Knoxville, make enough shots. Dalton Knecht goes nuts. Cats are in the Final Four, national title game. And then we get a 1987 repeat. But this time, Big Blue Nation comes out on top. Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham combined for 55 points coming off the bench. Kentucky gets title number 9. And Big Blue Nation says bye-bye to the haters. And Cal gets to breathe a little easy and probably retires. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he retires if we win it. But crazy Final Fours, a very realistic Final Fours, all of us in a lot of ways. And probably all completely wrong, like I mentioned at the beginning of this. It's probably going to be absolute madness. That's why we love this month. I want to say, from all of us, and you guys can chime in, we're at 546 viewers, by far our most ever on a stream. The download numbers for the audio is always our biggest show every year. I'm sure it's going to do great numbers too. So for all of you who followed along with us for quite a long time, thank you. Thank you, Derek Haslam, for joining the show today. You guys have any final parting words for our final show before NCAA Tournament kicks off on Thursday?
I just want to say thank you, fellas, for having me last year, and look what this turned into. What an incredible year from this crew. I know it's not over yet. We still got 3.5 more weeks of this, but just big thank you to you guys for having me, and the last year's been incredible. Thank you to 553 people who decided to join this today. I mean, that's just, man, incredible support. Thank you to everybody from last night as well. I mean, over almost 2,000 viewers in 2 nights. It's just an incredible thing. We can't thank you guys enough.
I second that. Peyton?
Yeah, well, just a second what he just said. I appreciate everybody that hopped in here. It's definitely our highest viewed live episode that we've done since we basically switched over to StreamYard and started doing live episodes again. I've had a blast. It's been a hell of a year, and it's only getting started again because now it's time to get serious. NCAA tournament action starts actually tomorrow. First 4 games start tomorrow. Be interesting to see these next month from here on to April is going to get hella busy. I hope you guys watch all these games. Join our bracket show. Or not a bracket show, join our bracket challenge, get into that. The details will be pinned in our Facebook group, or you can just hop on Twitter and find it out there. As far as you guys go, it's glad to have Phil back. hopefully we can see more of him as the tournament continues to go on. Always nice to see my favorite ginger. And then for Trevor, I think Trev has been a great addition to our team this year. He's done a hell of a job from doing our magazine work to going to a multitude of games. # quiet court, by the way. 40 games. That is ridiculous. And I guess also shout out to Michael DeRosa. Before I shout out Michael, let me shout out Josh, because obviously he stirs the pot here. He's the one who gets us all these things going on, man.
You do that, by the way, but sorry.
Shut up. He schedules the show majority of the times. He's constantly doing shit to help us improve our equipment and all this stuff. And he does a hell of a job. And just by the way, I think he's been clamoring for this 9th title since they won the 8th title in 2012. So it doesn't surprise me he picked Kentucky to win the national championship. As far as DeRosa goes, DeRosa, welcome to the show. I guess it's been glad to see you on. By the way, do you remember when Josh said Butler was a lock to make the NCAA tournament? You remember that, right?
Let's end on a
Yes, of course I fucking do.
I meant the NIT. Hey, my paisan, I meant the NIT. What the hell
bullshit.
do you want?
You ain't mean to get the fucking devil out of here. You ain't no way you meant no damn NIT. No.
Phil, say what you got to say. Peyton got us off course there.
Yeah, no, it's been good to be back. I've been able to watch some college basketball this year, but unfortunately just haven't been able to hop on here with you guys. So I really enjoyed doing the interview with you last week, Josh. And yeah, happy to be back for the biggest episode of the year. And hopefully we'll be on for a few of the episodes throughout the tournament.
Well, our next one's coming live to you again next Monday. Obviously, we're not going to record in the middle of rounds 1 and round 2. We do have round 1 action starting on Thursday. Those games will be Thursday, Friday. Round 2 will follow on Saturday, Sunday. We will be back live with you 5 p.m. next Monday, March the 25th. And when we come back to you on a live episode, we will talk all about the first 2 rounds. The Sweet 16 will be set up. We'll preview those games and much more. But from all of us, one last time, thank you to the 572 live viewers that tuned in. Thank you to everybody who commented. Thank you to Eric Haslam. Thank you to our network, House Enterprise and House of College Hoops. And for all of us, enjoy March Madness. It is finally here. And until next Monday, when we break down the first and second round action and talk about the Sweet 16 and beyond, we hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll catch you down the road.
We sleep in May.